side. Oops.
So, okay, here we have Dr. Judy with her bird, and it's looking kind of scary because the bird looks like, well, it's playing possum. Is that?
Yeah. Let's see if I can.
That's hilarious. So,
It's just how it sleeps. I mean, it stretches out and lays on its side.
that's crazy. Okay, we're freaking out people, I think, at this point.
Oh, but are people there? They know who this is?
Let's see. Well, they probably gave up on me because I was trying everything
Going
I
around.
could to get
Let's
us live.
see.
Let's let's just keep going. We're going to assume that people are going to see this, even if not live. They'll see it in the. In,
Okay. Let's see. See if he can. They can recognize his forehead, maybe.
okay. So explain this to me again about how chickens do this. You have dirt on your leg. Okay.
Oh, see, that's what I don't like about holding this camera, because who knows what I have. I don't think I've dirt on my leg, some
Okay.
dirt in my pants there, but I was out
No,
playing. So,
just your knee. That's all I saw. Okay. So who's this?
well, this is Nugget.
Is that Nugget? My goodness. Nugget has grown. That's amazing. So
That's
Nugget
what I thought I
does.
might recognize that forehead shot. Recognize the comb.
Somebody says, "Ah, you woke me up." Well, that's good. We're here to wake people up. If nothing else, by chickens. So this is Nugget, who was born on the day before Easter, correct?
Yep, the night before during the show.
And I believe one of our audience members did the
Named him.
naming of Nugget. And so, hey, sup Nugget. Timed Pieces says, sup Nugget. So I apologize to everybody for the technical issues. I don't know how this happens that everything's copacetic before the show and then all of a sudden, you know, issues. So
I think Nugget's a boy. If you can
Nugget's
see
a
his
boy.
forehead, it's got some pink on the comb. Let's see if he holds his head still.
I want to see Nugget play possum
See,
again.
oh, okay. He's about to play possum again.
Let's see.
He's
This
gonna eat
is
some food.
this
He's
is
on a
really
towel with
creepy.
some food on the towel.
Hi Nugget.
Emergency
Nugget
cleaning.
can't Nugget can't hear me because he doesn't have headphones. That's what you need, chicken headphones. That's what I want to see.
He's because the new feathers are coming in. He's got to work at getting them. They come in like toothpicks, and they kind of blossom out the ends,
Uh huh.
and there's a little tube to pull off like dandruff. You see how he's got under his wing there. Another reason I think it's a boy is because it's like, no, I got to do it my way.
What are you saying? Okay, so for the
Yeah,
boys
yeah.
out there, I need
He's
you to chime in.
like watch this. So he'll pull it back like, no, leave me alone.
Yeah, they're
Where the other one, like I can't make this one sit down. He's gonna eat now. Okay.
so. I think some of the women out there would probably say that it must be a girl because of that. So there could be some controversy brewing. But
Well,
who says no the most?
the other one, Puff. If you want Puff to sit down, you just push her down as she sits. And this
So,
one is like, no, I gotta do it my way. And the
somebody
boys
likes
tend
the
to be like
idea of
that.
the chicken headphones. I think really we should go that route. Maybe some earbuds, they were
Or
saying.
did you just hear that sound? It was like, leave me alone. Yeah, I'll do it again, see if you can hear it. No, it didn't do it. No, isn't complaining this time. All they do is eat and sleep and poop.
So what have we learned from the chickens so far?
A lot. And there's excitement last night. They graduated. Mama took them up to the roost. Well, she couldn't get them up there. I put them up there. I have some steps for them. But she wanted them to go up there badly last night, and I discovered today why. She laid an egg.
Oh, really?
So and then she abandoned them. They're all up by I let them run loose, and I went out, and she was gone. But then she tattled, and where she was, she started yelping. She was behind the bush next to my garage, just hollering. A
So
different kind of hollering than when she's looking after the babies. But she's been doing this for over a month. Because how long ago? It was 4 weeks ago. It was Easter,
I think so. I'm going to say yes.
and the other babies are 2 weeks older. So she's been chaperoning them around for a while.
So Dr. Judy and we talk a lot about um, kids, how kids have grown up in this culture, and I guess really the problem with the snowflakes and the
Yeah, you got to
inability for.
see some of the baby chicks, pretending to do boxing, and they square off and explore how to play play fight. They like one wants to get his head over the other one, which wants to get his head over that one. They end up twisting their necks around together and run around in circles or jumping over each other. Then they
I'm
go
not
do
sure
something else.
not sure if you saw the video that I shared. It was not that long ago. I think it was just this morning for me. So it was Dr. Peterson talking to another fellow, an Australian guy, and he went off in a different direction than he normally does, because they were talking about how people coddle their kids and that sort of thing, and a lot of people just sort of stop there and they say, well, these kids are coddled. But Peterson went into an explanation about that, and it has something to do with the chickens that we're talking about here, and how the natural world deals with their young. Because, as Dr. Judy was saying, the mom has laid a new egg, and the kids have to kind of fend for themselves to a certain extent. And that's.
Well, yeah, but in the past 3 days, or more than that, 4 days or so, I knew she wanted to take them up to the roost. She'd go up, fly up to the roost, and then like, come on, not realizing they can't fly up there. And so I went out and got some steps for them, so they could follow her up if they wanted to. A stepping stool, and then those plastic shelves that you get. There's one, they're like 3 shelves tall. So you take one shelf off and put it in front for the first step, and then the double shelf behind for the second step. And so they can get up to the roost. But they just didn't want to do that. That was too weird. So, but she really wanted them up there, and then she'd give up and go back down and let them pile up on top of her. But then last night, she was standing up there wanting them there, and I started putting them up there. And she was wanting them all to sit on the roost with her. Yeah, he's gonna lay over, and that wasn't working because there's several of them that wanted to cuddle underneath her. That they still need to keep warm and cuddle next to mom, and some wanted to be on top of her, and some wanted to be under her, and you can't do that very well on a roost. Like only one can do that. So finally, I took her off and put her in the sandbox that's underneath the roost. And so some who could sit on the roost could be above her, and then the other ones could be around her. And I sent Joni 2 different clips. The one is when they're all trying to be on the roost, and it sounds like mayhem. You can hear them all chattering. And then when I get her down in the sandbox, suddenly it's peace and quiet and just purring. So it's kind of good. But she cared about them. But then, she's been kind of, wanting to do her own thing a little bit. And she, what are you going to do? I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera so I don't need to worry about holding it. There it goes. She still looks out for, like, if somebody else pecks on him, then she'll, hey, what are you doing? And run that one out of the area. But gradually is leaving them to fend for themselves. The biggest change, yesterday was they spent the night together up on the, sort of on the roost, and there's a sand bucket underneath or pan underneath where they roost to collect the poop. And so I clean it every day, so it was clean. So she sat on there with the ones that need to be cuddled up to her. They got out this morning, and the babies go through the fence. But I let mom out to be with them, and she was escorting them around, but it was different. She would dig dig for bugs and worms and stuff. And she found a worm, and a baby grabbed it, and then she pecked at the baby for grabbing it.
Hmm.
And in other words, she was starting to compete with them for food. Before, she would always feed them first, and she would only eat the leftovers. If nobody else wanted the worm, she didn't want it to go to waste, and she'd eat it. But she was mad that the baby took the worm. So that was a big change. A sudden change. And then she wanted to go in real badly, and I let her in, and she went and laid an egg. And I let her back out. She was with the babies as a group, and I went inside, and I came back out. The babies were all there, but she was gone. So I went hunting for her, and she was around inside the house. So she's done with them, sort of. She'll be friendly with them, but they aren't her world anymore. But she's there. If there'll be some that have to cuddle up to her to stay warm tonight, and Nugget's one of them, and so is Puff,
Well, a couple
and
of them
there's
were
several
born.
others.
A couple of them were born after Nugget as well, so they're a bit younger.
No, no, they no. Puff was the last one.
Oh,
Um, these other ones are a different thing. They're not hatched yet, but yeah, there was what do you call it, Marshmallow, who is a week earlier.
right.
And then so is the main group, and then there's a week, and there's Marshmallow, and then there's another week, and then there's these two.
See, I can't keep track. There's just too many of them. There's 14.
But so it's 6 weeks for the main group, the group that she hatched,
Okay.
and those other
So,
ones are add-ons. But of that first group, there's some silkies in there, and they're kind of wimpy.
so
They're
let me
slow
ask you
growing, and
this.
they're tinier.
What you know about the way that the chickens work, would 6 weeks be about the nurturing time when it comes to the hens with their babies?
Yeah, that's what she thinks. Last year, I think it was 4 weeks, and then just one day suddenly she was kind of done with them. But she doesn't turn on them, but it's like you can tell that that's what she's doing. Like that, the subtlety of getting mad that the baby ate her worm that she dug up, and the babies were assuming that she was going to feed them for the rest of their life. That she was digging and there's a worm. No, she wasn't digging the worm for them. She was digging it for her, but they could still, move around with her, and because they know how to dig worms now.
Right. Well, I find this really interesting because I have 6 kids, and when I was watching this interview, they took a 9-minute piece of the interview. I had seen the whole thing, but it really helped bring this into focus because what they were talking about, Peterson was saying that, if you're 18 and you're having a child, it's a much more natural thing than when people have been waiting their whole lives to have a child and they put everything into it and they only have 2 kids. And he said rather than 6. It was kind of funny because he named the 2 things that I could relate to. I was 18 and I had 6 kids. And he said, the kids help to look after themselves at a certain point. There's just this natural thing that takes place. Now, I'm just paraphrasing. But what I'm noticing about the chickens is kind of the same thing as what he was saying. Is there's a natural progression, and the chicks the babies start taking care of themselves at a certain point because they have siblings.
Right, like yeah, I often watch those monkey videos, and there's this one particular monkey that they get to a certain age where it's time to wean, and some of them it's easy, and it's natural and easy, and because they've already started, they have teeth, and they've started to get eat their own food, and the mother shares, or good mothers will share their food with the baby, and then the baby show the baby how to find food. Then the gradually the baby's learning how to do it. There's this one where the baby's still wanting to nurse off the mom that's a year old.
Yeah.
He's a big baby, and the mother's the most patient thing, but she every once in a while puts her foot down, and no, you can't do that. That's it's like
Yeah.
he's a real spoiled brat, and he's a problem child. It's kind of funny, like she's grooming him. They pick bugs off each other, but she's grooming him, and then he's seeing her breasts, and he sees get his tongue going, and he's thinking about it. And he's ooh, he's keeping his head closer and closer, and then she whaps him.
This just wouldn't go over well in the human world. As much as a mom might feel like
Well, in the
Uh,
human world, I mean, the mother walks off from the baby, or the toddler, or whatever that's still trying to nurse it at 4 years old.
Well, the sad thing is that some of the moms don't, and I wonder how much of it has to do with the mother's needs. And there's something different about the animal world there. That well,
But
maybe the
yeah, but there is something odd about this. This is the only one I've seen that's gone on and on like that. And every once in a while, she works at it. But in addition, he can eat fine. And he's such a cutie pie that the tourists would toss him, corn on the cob and plenty of other things. And he started getting really obese. Plus, he still wanted to nurse. It wasn't like he needed anything to eat.
right. Well, you see,
There was another need there, and maybe it has something to do with the mother's blind in one eye,
right. So
and,
she's
and the baby, they call him Sweet Pea. He didn't intermingle with the other ones or learn to play with the other ones, and so nobody likes him really. And so lately, for friendship, he's found infant monkeys to try to play with,
I'm going to see
because
if I can find some.
the ones his age won't play with him.
So this has a lot of implications. Of course, I always look at things in this kind of big picture way, because
Hmm.
you know it. I try to explain things in my own mind so that I can understand them a little bit more, because
Yeah,
I
excuse me, what Jordan Peterson was saying about one of his 12 rules. Don't let your kids do things that make you hate them, and because you also want, if you don't love your kid because he does something that you really hate, what are other people going to be like? And
it's
that kid
easier said
will
than done
not be
though.
liked by
And
the
this is
world, and that's a bad situation. So you got to learn to get your kid to behave so people will like him. And that's a perfect example that having a monkey baby, that the other ones, he doesn't play well with others. And well, he probably because he was a big crybaby. He just cry all the time. I want.
what I liked about this interview with Peterson was that he explained it a little bit more, because what he was talking about is how much we invest in our kids and how hard it is to do that, how hard it is to not hover over them and take care of them. Because he said, in the old days you'd have 12 kids and 6 of them would die. And, it was very much more straight ahead. You had to deal with these issues. You start very early in life, and that's your whole life. You're having kids and working
But
on the farm.
yeah, I can think of a good example. I babysat the next door neighbor girl and helped her learn to ride a bike. She had training wheels. And then, you raise the training wheels up, and I would walk along, behind her, my feet going plop, 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 plop on the cement, and she felt comfortable. She was afraid for me to let go, and then it got to a point where I was going plop, plop, plop behind her, not holding on to the bike,
Oops, sorry.
and she could go fine as long as she didn't know that I wasn't holding on. But then okay, the kid's gonna pile up into the grass, a block later or so. Fine, it won't get hurt. The kids bounce, and then the kid learns what it did to fall over
Oh, I know
and
it's.
not to do it. But if, as a parent, you don't want to see the kid fall over. But how else does a kid learn how to keep upright?
They
You have
rarely
to let
say
go.
kids bounce. I have to say that I used to have a drop-in childcare center, and parents were so picky about it that they'd say, I don't like the term drop-in. It sounds as though you're dropping the child. And I just thought, they're so sensitive. No matter what I did, they thought it was somehow a mercenary thing. I was doing something rotten to their kid. And we grew up in that kind of environment, so I can certainly see why the kids turned out the way they did. What I found really funny, well, in a sad kind of way, there was a fellow that worked at the daycare center that I ran, and one of the kids came in, he was 3 years old, and the mom said, "Look, Sally, there's an M-A-N." And the kid knew what that meant. So here's the mom's paranoia, and possibly for good reason, being inflicted on this kid at 3 years old. So it's no wonder we have a weird group of people as adults now.
And there's too much parent involvement that way, rather than just like being around. Like I guess they call them free range kids. turn the kids loose. They go play down the street, and you have rules like tell me when you're going out. You got to be back by dinner time or whatnot, and you know,
When the
I'm
street
going to
lights go
Susie's
out.
house or something, and they go play down at the corner, and whatever uh, parent is their house, then they get to set the rules for how the kids play there. And somebody punches somebody out, somebody cries, and somebody deals with it, and they figure things out, what not to do, and how to help someone feel better who had a rock fall in their toe, or lost in a game of checkers or whatever their issue was. But if kids don't learn how to do that, just do the bumps and bruises of life. Geez, I
So
think
when
one of the looking back at what my parents did, they refused to be taxi drivers. If you wanted to go someplace, you got to ride your bike, or earn some money so you can pay 10 cents for the bus fare. Tells you how long
right.
ago it was. And okay, so I learned to ride my bike wherever I wanted to go, and that's we all did that kind of thing. And being a parent, you know, later, I yeah, you can't you turning a kid loose like that. Oh, all sorts of stuff could happen to him. Yikes! But that's how they grow up.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we live in a different world now where there's some sinister things happening to kids, and it's a more populated world. It's more complex for kids, and there are some
Hmm.
legitimate concerns. But how much of that is trumped up by the media, and how much of
Right,
that is real?
exactly. That milk cartons and that
What?
type of thing.
So why do you
Or
think
but
that's
yeah, our whole world is kind of overrun by who can get away with bending this rule or that rule or downright breaking the rule,
well?
rather than people living for the common purpose of just living life and having a
Sorry.
fair play of game. But I was also thinking about like when I was bike racing. Man, you could crash in the corner, tear up your leg, break your back, and not walk again. And lots of stuff can happen to you. It's like a parent taking a kid to gymnastics. Things can happen. But that's part of living life.
Well, I'm really curious about the audience and how they feel about this because a lot of the people that we have in the audience are, of course, younger, and well, some of them are older as well. But I'm curious about the challenges of people who have grown up in those kind of situations. I see that we have Bjorn here, and I'm thinking Bjorn is from Sweden. Now, I could be wrong because it could be
Yeah,
Norway.
I think I heard the figure 1980. Those born after 1980, that was when the milk cartons, and bad learning about bad things happening, and driving kids to school. So before then, it was sort of free range kids.
Well, what happened in 1980? What was the deal then? You've got some ideas, I
Well,
think.
just things changed about people getting worried about when we started hearing about kids getting snatched,
Right.
and I don't know. I don't know what started first, because with the media gets all worried about something, then it's sort of like enticing the bad guys to do it. Kind of like the school shoot 'em ups. The more they advertise it, the more it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't advertise it, others might not get the idea to compete in that
Okay,
arena.
so if
So
the
whatever it was, the snowball started rolling around 1980. Um, like driving kids to school, not letting them walk to school.
yeah.
So if somebody responds back, maybe they can describe it if they're on the older side of that cutoff. We don't even know their exact age, but pre 1980, post 1980. They're
Well,
just
uh,
when they're born.
I'll give you a little anecdotal example of that because I started having kids in '76. I was very young, of course, but when I first had kids, I did not know the first thing about well, babies and that sort of thing, and I sort of just had them, and you deal with things. Well, I had one of my kids in 1981, so this is kind of going to your point, and this health nurse came to my door. Now, this was my third child, So I'd already had a couple of kids, and they seemed to survive. But she started handing me all these pamphlets about, the various things that can happen during pregnancy, toxic, problems, and drinking the wrong tea can make you lose the baby and all this sort of stuff.
Excuse me. Can you turn up your volume a little bit? For some reason, I can't hear you very well.
Okay, I think.
Or close to the microphone.
Yeah, I'm going to go closer to the mic, and hopefully people can hear me out there. Let me know.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay, because I need to know. And there's something weird going on here, and I don't know what it is. So let me know if you can't hear me. So anyway, the point is, 1981, I had my third child, and this health nurse came by, and she started handing me all these leaflets and pamphlets and all the things that can go wrong, and how to build your child's self-esteem and all this other stuff. And at that point, I went, there's something going on here. People are trying to indoctrinate me into a way of thinking that was just fine before, when I had the first two kids. Now, what's going on? So you're right. There was a real push, even with me as I would say an experienced mom. They were trying to scare me. And all of a sudden I went, oh, all these things could go wrong with my child. And I need to have this health nurse involved in my life. And it was weird because I was able to handle it with family and friends up until then. And all of a sudden there's this expert mentality that comes in. So I think you're right. Something happened in 1980. Can you hear me?
And also, right after that was when they wouldn't let a kid be discharged from the hospital unless they had what do you call it, the car carrier.
Oh yeah.
As I remember, my sister-in-law was telling me about that. They wouldn't release him from the hospital. After that, their next kid, she decided to have it home. The heck with all this game playing.
Well, I have to say, in '76, I had to have a car carrier before I could take my kid home, my baby, my lovely
baby. Oh, so
baby.
you guys were ahead of us.
Oh
Maybe
yeah,
it was true in the U.S.
We're on the West Coast.
I wasn't really aware of those kinds of things.
I think the West Coast adopted a lot of that stuff earlier, early adopters of snowflake technologies. But, I think car seats are a great idea. It's just sometimes I wondered if I'd be able to get my child out of the car in an emergency because I could never figure out how to work the little latch.
Yeah, there is a, when people first started when they first started requiring helmet use on motorcycles. For a while they didn't, and people said, what's it to anybody else? And the explanation I was given, and I believe this one to this day, is that if you're involved in a wreck, you're on a motorcycle without a helmet with a vehicle, even if it's the motorcyclist's fault and he dies, then the person in the automobile is left with that hanging over their head. It's a sentence that they have to carry. Mm-hmm. Even if they were not in the wrong, you're involved in something where the other person died. That's not a good feeling. No. And so that's where it does affect other people. Someone said, well, why do I have to wear a helmet? What's it to anybody else? I suffer the consequences. What's it to anybody else? And that's why it is to somebody else's concern.
I thought you were going to say that it raises everybody's health costs, but that's a real mercenary
just the idea of you're involved in a pileup, in a wreck, and somebody wasn't wearing a seatbelt or something, and if or motorcyclist wasn't wearing a helmet, and they end up dying, whereas otherwise they might not have. Then it's the other people in that wreck, the other vehicles and so forth, have that on them. That somebody died. Mm-hmm. And so that's the explanation I think is meaningful, but other stuff, saving people from themselves, it needs to be a limit.
I'm going to segue a little bit.
I've often said that, if a house is, on fire and somebody's smoke alarm doesn't go off, the smoke alarm didn't go off, so I'm fine.
Well, again, this makes me think about how people deal with things like 9/11 and the fact that we're surrounded by just these stories, these absolute stories that we take in verbatim, and we don't question them. It's very much like that idea of the smoke detector. Oh,
Yep.
it can't possibly be a fire because the mainstream media didn't let me know. And we don't use our own common sense at a certain point.
Right, right. I don't know why they call it common sense. It's
Okay,
our own
uncommon.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the sense that we were given that we suppress.
That's one of the reasons why it bothers me that they require people to have smoke detectors. Because then, if people become reliant on a gizmo or an alarm rather than their own sense of, I smell smoke, let me go check it out.
What if you're a heavy sleeper?
Maybe figure out, maybe if you choose to have a smoke alarm or something, not have it required, but, optional.
I see.
It's just the thought. I'm not saying this is a must, but
Mm-hmm.
to think of that issue as to how it affects people. Because often, I might smell something and like, is that a wire burning? And
Mm-hmm.
I make sure that I will go check it out if it smells like it, not depend on the smoke alarm.
Do you know what a lot of people do when something happens? They turn on the TV or the radio to see if anybody else has heard about it. They don't trust their own instincts. Like if there's an earthquake or something, you're supposed to go and stand under a door jamb or whatever. People have lost that instinct to go and do what's natural, to go to a place that's safe, and rather than looking at their phones or their, the TV
Oh,
set.
weird.
Yeah, it's
There was
it's
an earthquake here, at Clemson, and I was in my office. It was, I think it was grading final exams or something. I was there like, all night, and it was like 5 in the morning, and my desk lamp started bouncing up and down. And I thought, well, maybe I've been drinking too much coffee and I'm too jittery. But I held my breath and held still. Nope, that desk lamp is definitely bouncing up and down. Yeah, we're definitely having an earthquake. Okay, then I went and stood in the doorway. That's what you're taught, in elementary school. And then it was still continuing, and the building sort of felt like a parallelogram. I said, well, I better see if I can just make a fast run to the stairwell. That'd be better. I got to the stairwell, and then by then, this is a long time it went on. It started calming down, and I went down the stairs to the first floor. It was just the floor below, and there's these Indian students talking, and like nothing happened. I said, well, didn't you feel that? Oh yes, it was approximately a 4.2, and they went back on talking to each other like nothing happened.
so maybe they
They'll
were in
never
the
forget it because
seismic
they're used
area.
to, that was normal for their life.
Well, do you think
But
that
yeah, I don't regret doing it. I don't feel like I was like an alarmist or anything. I first determined, yeah, something is definitely happening, and I went and got in the doorway immediately. So I thought, okay, it's still continuing on. Yeah, it really is happening, and then decided better head to the stairwell.
I think that there's a huge range of things that can take place when we start not to go with our instincts, and this kind of goes back to the parenting thing. As we look at the chickens and we see the monkeys and all the moms in nature and how they deal with their kids, then we move into this other realm of our instincts, because they talk about the mother instinct and our natural instincts. Do you think that there's a move to eliminate those kind of instincts, to
Yeah,
follow instructions?
that was my big concern for years now, ever since we've been required to have smoke alarms, is that they're deadening your own senses about things, or even the idiot lights in a car. Oh, the idiot light isn't on, so my engine must be fine, rather than there's something wrong with the idiot light.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to have a sense of what's going on in the car, is an important thing, because you don't want to get stuck someplace, or destroy a nice car, otherwise nice car. But speaking on that issue, another chicken story. For some reason, I have no idea what it is. There's a helicopter. I don't know if it's a police surveillance one or what, but it's circling around overhead this afternoon. It was, gradually making loops and moving over like it's just checking over an area. And it was, each time it would loop around, my chickens get crazy. It's like, is that a big, hawk coming to get them, or is it a bigger monster, or what is that? And they just run for cover each time.
Hmm.
They
They
wouldn't get
know.
complacent, each time they ran for cover.
You can't. just sit around if you're an animal because you know that there's natural predators. And so there are fears that are natural to people and to animals, but there are these overriding fears or these inflicted fears, I think, that are uh, created for a purpose. And that's the part that I want people to be aware of, that there's
Mm-hmm.
an agenda to make you respond in particular ways. It's not about the fear itself, it's that they're playing into a certain response and changing the way that we
Here's a
respond.
mental exercise. Yeah, that I often do is imagine like caveman era. How caveman would be negotiating these various things. I think they would be making much healthier decisions, along with do they trust somebody else?
Right.
And they don't just say, well, if I don't trust them, and they mess up on me, I mean, if I trust them and they mess up on me, I can go sue them. No, their life depends on their being who they can trust and their
Right.
senses. And if you think about that, if your life depends on you're getting the right answer, not like, well, if I go along with everybody else, I didn't know, not my fault. That doesn't fly. Like the deal with 9/11, I often would suggest, okay, let's have somebody walk the plank over a tank of sharks. If they get the wrong answer, in the tank they go. Doesn't matter what the majority thinks. It matters what they say. Now, what's the right answer? What's the story? The deal with thermite, mini nukes, versus looking at the evidence of what happened. How do you sort out, like, why would people go with a mob mentality? They wouldn't do that in caveman era where their life depended on it.
Hmm.
They would have some way of measuring it to have an indication of what they understood as real. What do you
Right.
think?
Well, yeah, I think that that's exactly what you were saying earlier about the fact that the smoke alarm idea is that. That I just keep going back to this thing of not going by our instincts, but also not going by our sense of what needs to happen. And I think about the number of times that I've gone along with other people's opinions or ideas rather
And you
than
feel safe. It feels like you're safer doing that. But what's the alternative? Like, what happens if it's well, I won't be in the bad spot by myself,
yeah. I've got a
But
picture.
it's also the deal with you know, well, if everybody else is thinking that, and I think that, and then if it's wrong, we can go sue somebody.
This seems to be the issue that I have with the Q phenomenon and all these different things. Now, there could be some really great things about what is happening there and, people being awakened. And I get all that. I think it's really great. I just wonder why people glom onto these ideas when they're right there. They've been there all along. We've known about these things that Q's mentioning. And it's great that people are being awakened to that. So that I'm going to put that aside and say, why is it that we continue on having to go back to the trough, as it were, speaking chicken language, and get our nourishment from the mom rather than just going, okay, now I can feed myself. I can start to go and do my own
Well, for
research.
example, why do people turn on the idiot box, the TV set? And nothing is real unless it's been on TV.
Well, that's a plan. That's been a plan for a long time.
Yeah, it may not have begun that way, but don't you think it's been weaponized by now? The
See, I
control of mass media.
I believe that everything's been weaponized right from the beginning because I'm going to
Oh
say that it
yeah.
was it was probably a patent, and I'm just looking at patents right now as being the way that the bad guys get hold of really good ideas and turn them around for their purposes.
Well, no, like the TV set, initially it seems kind of cool, and has this gee whiz factor, and there's some good, looks like some kind of good stuff about it that seems attractive, like especially like radio story shows, like they do Superman or something like that.
Hmm.
Okay, that was interesting entertainment, or soap operas on TV, there's at a point where people become complacent is where they really get sucked in. Now let's draw an analogy with the internet. Initially, it's got this, gee whiz factor, and ooh, cool, we could do this, this, and this. Isn't this powerful? Not realizing it's easily weaponized when you start dropping your guard. Wikipedia that controls public opinion, pretty much.
Right. Oh, there's no doubt that there's lots of things that are now collection agencies. Of course, I see positive things in
Facebook.
everything.
Yeah, Facebook initially was fun for people, and then okay, then it gets weaponized. Of course,
it was
everything gets
weaponized from the beginning. It was weaponized from the beginning because I know the person. I mean, I've interviewed the person that had the
Well, yeah,
patent.
but you know what I'm saying. It initially looks sweet and innocent
Oh, I
to
looks
suck people
yes.
in.
And if
How else do you get people hooked if it starts out looking weaponized? People don't go there. So it has to start out. They could have evil intentions, but they can't make it look that way because how else? It's like trap for animals. You got to make it some food there and make it look like camouflage. So they don't realize they're walking into a trap.
yes, exactly. I think that's so true. And then those of us that were saying, don't put everything you're doing all day onto Facebook. You may as well just write it on in a newspaper. They'd say, "Oh, conspiracy theorists," and now they're still looking at it as this. If it's weaponized, it must be people like bad people that are doing like Trump. They have to put a face on it, and it's always what they've been taught as the bad person. Here's the black hat, here's the white hat. Normally, it's the opposite to what it really is because they're trying to cover something.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, think of it as the dirty old man in a car with candy, trying to pick up the little girl walking home from school.
mm-hmm,
Well, he seemed so nice. He had candy.
yeah, and a van.
Yeah, in a van, right?
Sorry, I
Down
shouldn't.
by the river. No.
That's not. Yeah, the van down by the river where we were talking about how if you want to ban guns, I guess you have to ban
He banned
vans now.
vans.
So,
He
yeah, for
banned,
those that
banned butter knives. And
yeah. So, but that's not funny at all. I think that's the problem is that everything becomes a weapon if we allow it to, and if we don't open our eyes and see that we have to be vigilant all the time and realize that anything can be used as a weapon. Media, vans, guns, they're all
but
the same.
what becomes so important is your ability to apply logic. And my billiard ball example.
Yes.
It I came up with that on 9/11 because all of my colleagues were sucked into this building, collapse business. And I'm thinking, what on earth is going on? Am I insane or is the rest of the world insane? It's bizarre. They looked at me like I was crazy when I questioned. Wait, that's not what a collapse would look like. And so I did these calculations for how fast something would fall, and they looked at me like I was a nutcase because what they saw on the TV was flying bodies, horror scenes, and it just shuts down their logic. So I came up with this billiard ball example of you just follow the innocent billiard balls, as timing devices. And they looked at, I showed one of my colleagues that and says, is this, correct? And he looked at me like I was having a senior moment because it's such elementary physics. Of course it is.
And yet,
Okay.
people like
Yeah,
James
but then
Corbett.
you apply it to the World Trade Center and the logic is out the window.
Exactly.
And that the
Sorry.
powerfulness of that billiard ball thing is that in a parallel thing, just innocent billiard balls, it allows people's brains to work logically. So if you can do that with anything else, if you want to know what's going on, find a parallel example or exercise, the analogy to work through and apply logic to that. What I would also sometimes do is in something I was reading, replace some term with thingamajig.
Mm-hmm.
And then see, the logic should still be able to flow, because sometimes people see some high tech term and that wows them, and they don't realize that it makes no sense. Okay, for example, thermite. Super duper mini micro nano thermite, that new and improved. And they see that term, they think that it is something special, and their logic all goes by the wayside. So rewrite the article with thingamajig instead of thermite, and then your logic is allowed to work.
And yet, that's the thing you've been criticized for, because you'll say things like dustification or Cheetos or use
Yeah,
toasted cars or any of these other expressions that you've come up with in order, literally expressions to express a concept that doesn't have an
yeah.
explanation
I'm
as
just
yet.
describing a phenomenon. You don't. If you don't know what it is, you can't call it by the wrong name because you're biased in your observation. So you call it something, give it a name that's easy to remember. Not characteristic 2975-A. That's too hard to remember. Cheetos. Okay, we know that that's not a snack food in this application. It's this bent solid cylinder that looks like it's glowing. It's kind of orange like a Cheeto, but it's you can't say hot glowing metal because you don't know if it's hot. You don't know if it's metal, and so Cheeto just gets easy. So that's a phenomenon. Okay, here's some Cheetos over here. Oh, here's the Cheeto situation there. And I came to call it a Cheeto fire. Everything's just orange. You don't see any flames. Just everything's just orange. But that made it easy to identify characteristics without getting your emotions hung on something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important. The best example I can think of is the thermite thing. If you read a thermite paper and just say thingamajig everywhere it says thermite, and that doesn't look ooh, this is high tech important. That wow factor isn't there anymore, and you can see the reality of it.
What I find
Um,
really interesting
like on
lately.
9/11, we kept hearing collapse, and then you also heard ash, all the ash flying around. They're making you make assumptions,
Right.
and so pretty soon you don't have the problem left to solve because it's all filled with assumptions.
And what I'm finding right now is so many people that see themselves as being so-called awake or whatever you want to call it, they're really on to 9/11. They talk about building 7 as though that's some sort of a moniker for they know what's going on and other people don't. And yet if you were to say to those people, okay, look, you still don't know what's going on, because if you don't understand that all the buildings disappeared, were justified,
No,
then
I
you
wouldn't say disappeared. Yeah.
then
Mostly
you're
turned to dust
yeah, and you're
or
out
were
of the loop.
destroyed
So those people are almost harder to deal with because they really believe that they've seen the light, because they know that 9/11 was quote an inside job, but they don't.
because they've got a list of talking points and
Right.
their logo and their buzzwords and phrases, and they think they understand something, and that's another way of controlling public opinion is having various buzzwords and phrases that
Yeah.
they get repeated without somebody even knowing what they are.
And they're people that are very big on the internet, and this is what concerns me, because I'm thinking about Lionel. Now, I like Lionel, but I keep hearing and I keep making comments on the videos where he mentions this, because he keeps saying, we're on the inside, we're the people that know what's going on, and then he keeps saying, like, we understand what happened to Building 7, and there's
So what
something
happened
in.
to it? Why didn't it make almost no? That's too many negatives in there. It made almost no seismic signal. Why was that? No S wave or P wave, and very minimal surface waves. Just 1/30th or so, just a fraction of what you know you would expect. But no S wave or P wave. How do you explain that? If something falls down, go boom. Something you get an empty dump truck going down the road, kaboom, and you feel it. That's just an empty dump truck. How about several 100,000 ton, 230,000 ton building slamming to the ground, and you don't hear anything?
And yet they
Something
still.
something else is going on here.
They still show the pictures of these guys that came in for about a year. They were coming in and they had no reason to be there, and they had boxes. And well, but the thing is, again, you're starting with the concept that there are these people that came in and wired the place to be demolished. But how did they do it? I just want to know from the beginning. Where did they put this stuff that it was undetected? How did
But
the
when you prepare a building for controlled demolition, you need to remove everything that's not nailed down, plus everything that is nailed down. I mean, in other words, like office chairs, desks, and all that. And then if there's any non-bearing walls, those come out too. Windows definitely come out. Those, would decapitate somebody, cause a lot of damage. A Coke can in a windowsill becomes a projectile with the bomb, and it flies. Adjacent buildings would look machine gun fired. That didn't happen. And also, you don't see sheets of broken glass below. Nobody got sliced off. But we know that there was also windows there, that it wasn't prepared for controlled demolition because Mr. Hess was leaning out the window calling for help, I think from like the sixth floor or something, or third floor.
on
They had
Building
to
7?
work it, slide in the window to get it open. And so, okay, it was not prepared for controlled demolition. We know
Was that
that for a
Building
fact
7?
just looking at the images we've seen, because
Sorry,
there's
can you
glass
tell
in the
me a little bit
windows.
more about that and give me some context about him with Mr. Hess?
But
About, was he in Building 7? I
yeah,
forgot.
yeah, he was the city attorney or something like that, and he was talking about coming down the stairs, and he said, and I forgot how many things, five things happened, and it's bizarre if you think about how he describes it. Like the stairway ends, and so he's stuck. He couldn't go anywhere. They said also the lights went out, and the place was filling with dust. And, all the lights went out, and it was filling with dust. He
Hmm.
describes this thing that happened. He wasn't describing boom, 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 boom at all.
I
This
remember
is
that.
when the tower across the street went away. He didn't know it went away. You're across the street from Tower One. Tower One, 110-story building, goes away, and you have no concept of it while you're in Building 7.
I
He
remember that
put his head
interview.
out the window, but the window he stuck his head out wasn't one where he would be able to see Tower One. So he didn't know it
Right.
was missing.
Yeah, that's
That's pretty bizarre.
it is bizarre. And I love that you bring up these interviews because a lot of people haven't seen them themselves. Unless they've seen your presentation, they often don't know that they exist. Uh,
Or
they're they're in the book.
Barbara Crowley, as over on West Street, and Building 7's right behind her. She's talking to the interviewer, and she says, "Oh, we need water. We need this for the triage center, and if anyone, supplies was this." And then the crowd's going, "Ah!" And she's looking around to pimp. What's the deal? Like there's a monster. She has no idea that something's going on, and right behind her, the building was dropped. Building 7. She had no idea.
So much for the nukes. So much for the explosions.
You listen to a controlled demolition, you hear bang, 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 and then the building starts coming downward.
Pancaking.
Starts easing down, but you have a lot of stuff firing out. But Building 7, the innards of it had mostly turned to dust. You could see that as soon as it starts kind of going downwards, and it, had crevices or whatever in it, it just dust was squirting out of it. Why would you have dust squirting out of it? It had to be just like the towers. And people say, "Oh, it was nothing like the towers. It just looked a little bit different." But if you look at the tipping top of Tower 2, it's about 35 stories. It tips over, and then it kind of collapses down. It appears to collapse down before the rest of it goes down to the ground, um, or appears to go down to the ground. Uh, Imagine that's Building 7 on top instead of that 35 stories of building
Mm-hmm.
2. Imagine that's just building 7 up there. It does the same behavior. But
And
the fact that people did, like what um, Michael Ober said, people said that it was on the seismic signal. I don't know if that's true or not, because why don't I remember the sound of it? If it's hitting the ground that hard, why don't I remember the sound of it? And there's quite a few people that said, wait, wasn't there a building here? And that was with all of them.
well, you
But
see, yeah.
the tendency of saying it looks like, so therefore it is. Okay, let's talk about the parallel example of that logic. Um, let's say a wooden box at a magic show, and the magician cuts a woman in half who's in the wood box. Oh, sure looks like he cut her in half, but
Mm-hmm.
then she's alive in one piece at the end of the show. So obviously that isn't what happened. So it looks like doesn't mean that it is, because they're also just going on one particular piece of information, rather than if something, controlled demolitions slam parts of the ground. They just break the building apart and then they smash the pieces to the ground. So there's a thud when this stuff hits. It's like a tuning fork getting hit. You're going to have some vibrations in the ground.
Right.
If that doesn't happen, well, wait a minute. Then what? How do you explain that?
Well, people go on to the different subjects, and this is again what I see about the Building 7 thing, because they haven't even really described what happened with Buildings 1 and 2. But now they're going to distract you over to Building 7 and say, well, I understand that
So
Building
that's
1
a
and.
trump card of some sort. I think I told you that, after Morgan and I first were doing that first article, the next article, which we never got to because I took off on do more in 1 and 2, was going to be named Building 7 and the Easter egg hunt,
Can you tell
because
people?
it was distracting people away from other stuff as an Easter egg hunt, because it would get you focusing on the Easter egg rather than what the evidence is.
Can you tell people about Morgan Reynolds and what your work was initially when before you did the book? That's really interesting, I think.
Well, I was by myself, and I knew that was kind of suicide to stick my neck out. Also, Fetzer had ownership of me and wouldn't let me. I was just helping out until they found somebody else, but he quit looking for somebody else to be his webmaster. I'd never done anything with the website before, but I figured out how to do it just to fill in, because I'm a team player. But he was using that to control me. But I couldn't leave that because, uh, he was going to destroy me publicly, but he ended up doing that anyway. But so I went to visit Morgan Reynolds without anybody knowing, except the person I went there with. And I never met him before. I just had one phone call from him, and that was my student was murdered, and he knew about it from a different source, and he was trying to get Fetzer to take collection up to buy flowers and send to the family, and Fetzer wanted nothing to do with it. And so I get this phone call. Hi, my name is Morgan Reynolds. What's wrong with Jim? That was he introduced himself to me. And so based
Meaning
on that
Jim
one
Fetzer.
thing, I knew he had some thinking brain cells, and he was the only person I could trust. The fact that he was wondering what was wrong with Fetzer, because he just wanted nothing to do with the deal with my student. Just wanted to pretend it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left Sunday morning at 4 a.m. And it's like a 16-hour drive. Well, I knew he was going to be there because I called, and his wife said, "Oh, is Morgan there?" "Oh, no, he's off giving a talk someplace." And I knew that he was. "Oh, when will he be back?" And I was given the time. Okay, all right, I'll call back then. And instead, I arrived then and drove straight through. But would you believe that within 4 hours of my leaving town here, Fetzer filed a missing persons report?
Wow.
He had that close of tabs on me, and he lost control of me. He lost, we slithered out, cash only, buying gas,
That is
and
so manipulative when you look at it. It's I'm gonna it's not only to tell you, but it's to literally keep tabs on you. That's so frightening. And the
Right.
fact that you knew that is amazing. That you,
And when I got to Morgan's place, he was like, "Huh?" He was so surprised. But he then said, "Well, Fetzer called him early in the day when asking him if he knew where I was, and he didn't because I showed up unannounced." And he thought that was pretty weird that Fetzer would do that. So Fetzer even had an inkling that I might contact Morgan. That's pretty good tabs on me.
and the first inkling that you had was the fact that Fetzer wasn't caring about the student. Is that true, or was
No,
it?
no, that's what Morgan had because Morgan had learned about the death of my student through a different way. He hadn't known anything about me, but thought it would be decent to for the Fetzer's scholars group to pass the
Acknowledge,
hat and buy flowers for the family.
right?
It was like the decent thing to do, and Fetzer wanted nothing to do with it.
Now, was Morgan part of the scholars group? Is that how
Yep,
the
yep.
right? Okay.
And I had never talked with Morgan before that, but Morgan smelled something was funny. I knew it was my student, but he smelled something was funny with Fetzer. That's when he called me on the phone and said, "Hi, my name is Morgan Reynolds. What's wrong with Jim?"
And that was enough to make you go to him to know that there was
Well,
something,
if anybody, that one I could, I had the most trust in
right?
because he smelled that something was wrong with Fetzer. I had, but I couldn't go anywhere because who do I go to? Everybody was controlled. Everybody was, if I need to talk to somebody about the real evidence. And so what I took to show Morgan was several items, including the email I got from Stephen Jones when I told him my student had been murdered. He answered back, "Well, we've done it before. We can do it again if need be."
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a veiled threat, but you don't say that to somebody in response to their email saying that their student just was murdered.
Well, especially when he says we. Did I get that right? That he said we?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we've done it before. We can do it again if need be.
Well, that's not a
And
veiled
I,
threat.
I
That's
took
a,
that email to show Morgan, and as well as some other things, and explained to him what the whole situation was. And I said they're just trying to load everybody up in this basket, hand basket they can toss over the cliff. Then 9/11's not a problem anymore. The cover up survives. If you get anybody questioning, those who are questioning 9/11, if you get them to all jump into the thermite basket, then the cover up is safe. And I was explaining that to him, rather than looking at the logic. So Morgan got pretty excited, and he was quite impressed with what I had shown him and said to him. So I headed back home, and first thing I needed to get out from under Fetzer, who's going to help me do that. And of course, the no planes business. I wasn't so much into that because I was concerned with what happened in the buildings, but I knew that was a hot point spot for Fetzer. Thou shalt not question the airplanes. So I found, and Fetzer was out of town, wanted me to still be taking care of his website and posting articles, and just to tell him what articles I posted. So I posted some no plane articles, and got back. He made me resign. Oh, good, I'm out from under him. And I resigned from his scholars club, and then Morgan he accused of not controlling Judy, and for being insubordinate. He called him insubordinate. Morgan says, "Well, I'm not your subordinate, so I can't be insubordinate. Bye. I'm resigning too."
sheesh.
And unknown to most people, that was August 17th, 2006. We both resigned. Fetzer thought he'd get rid of us and shut us up that way, but instead we started doing more damage. And right after that, we put out the first article, which was Morgan mainly wrote that. Started out what's wrong with Jones, but why indeed did the towers totally disintegrate? Kind of mocking Jones's article, why indeed did the towers collapse? They collapsed, they disintegrated. But we were looking at what if thinks he's got this under control, why isn't he looking at this? Why isn't he looking at that? Why isn't he looking at that? And listed all these these things. And then we started in looking at those things. And I started doing this web page. Morgan then, I think, went out on his motorcycle rides and all. It was half done, but I sensed the need to post it uh, and did, for safety's sake. And
Mm-hmm.
and then, Fetzer then realized he had to reel us back in. And then he put up this fake divorce between him and Jones, acting like I was still on his team. No, it was 4 months earlier that we resigned. But Fetzer kept this image going. Same with Jones. They worked together. They're the odd couple that pretend to be fighting, but they're always best friends
Mm-hmm.
and play two sides of the same coin. But
What a
because they
lot of
wanted to get this divorce, the impression of a divorce going to just keep people from looking at my website, and it was successful.
A lot of people don't
But see,
realize that architects and engineers really came about as a result of you publishing your work. They had to group people into a collection agency.
yeah, and see, I was an engineer and the perfect person for this job, and so to counter that, architects and engineers, that's how Gage could put it. But he claimed not to be a scientist, so he didn't have to be accountable for what he said. He could. And Jones was now moved on, so he couldn't be questioned. So it's a perfect setup. But they immediately, from the get-go, anybody who had anything to do with Judy Woods, that's what they called it, was banned from the group. It's clear what the purpose of the group was. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
what a weird thing for the criteria.
I
And
think this is
if he realized somebody had something to do with me, or like Abe Rodriguez discovered my work and then forwarded it to Gage and said, "Oh, have you seen this?"
he's a
Like
great
as
supporter,
though it
isn't
was new
he?
information, and then Gage banned him from the group.
So, for those that don't understand how collection agencies work, I think this is a wonderful discussion because if you take a look at the history and how all of these various groups formed, particularly architects and engineers, and the fact that they had all this funding and these people that thought that they could control the others in the group and managed to do so, and then there are people like you and Morgan Reynolds.
Before the Architects and Engineers Group formed, before their website went up, I had already filed my request for corrections to NIST. I was the first person to do anything, and then filed my federal QTAM case. And
Yeah.
then up goes this Architects and Engineers website to divert attention from it.
All of this is
It was
on your
it was just
website,
like you
which,
see in the
sorry.
regular media when they want to distract people from something. When I first submitted my request for corrections to NIST, so that was my whistleblowing act, which qualified me to file the QTAM case. And then Andrew put out a what do you call it? Um, what do they call it? A press statement? I
A
forgot. Like
press release.
what?
Press release?
Yeah, press release, and to announce it. And well, when that was out, that made Jones look like he wasn't doing anything. So they divert from that. So suddenly, within a few hours of that, oh, never before released blueprints from the WTC. We finally got them, and that filled the, the airwaves so that people wouldn't realize what I had presented. And still to this day, they say they don't have the blueprints, that they're being kept from them. But they announced that they had the blueprints then.
This is
But what
so
do the blueprints
complex.
mean?
Do you find it's so similar to what's happening right now with
Exactly.
Trump?
That's why I recognize it so easily.
Yeah, you can see it so clearly. You have this whole camp of people that think they're in the know because they follow the mainstream media, and then if you come out with anything that does not follow that narrative, they just think that you're completely bonkers, and yet nothing they're saying makes any sense. You can go back and show them all the evidence you want to, but it's like they've just got their mind made up. It's unbelievable how this works with humans and their
And
minds.
then
It's
I filed this federal QTAM case. That was we're talking about April 2007. And then, Gage needs to make noise about legal cases. They filed a request for correction. No, I'm sorry, a FOIA thing, and a court action FOIA. So it looks like he's doing something. They never say what comes of those things, those Freedom of Information requests. And then they had this April Gallup that they pushed out there and abused her, man, in a serious way. That was the woman who was working at the Pentagon the morning that something happened. And they convinced her something about thermite, and she was promoting thermite in her thing, but that had nothing to do with the Pentagon. And there's no way her case was going to go anywhere. And to add insult to injury, literally, her lawyer appealed it, insulting the judge.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd be found in contempt or something like that, or he was fined for bad behavior. It wasn't about substance. But so if anyone heard about a legal case with regard to 9/11, they'd think of that one and they'd get it confused with me.
And now the tactic is to say, we want to reopen the case. We want to, 9/11 was never
Yeah,
properly investigated. Open up the investigation. And you have the investigation. You've got the
yeah. You want a new
entire thing.
investigation? Well, today's your lucky day. Here it is, all wrapped up with a bow on it.
People in the audience
Why?
need to
Why
understand
they
this
have
so that
no
they can
interest in it at all?
go to the website so that you can get this paperwork, because anytime you hear somebody, this is a call to action, I guess, for me, is what can I do? And what I like to do when people mention this, I just say, let's go over and look at the paperwork on drjudywood.com, because we can take a look at all of the original documents in order. And
Oh, it was laughed out of court. You need to look at to the motion to reconsider. That's where my lawyer wrote back to the judge who initially dismissed the case, and he dismissed it for various reasons. One of them was bombs in the building. Well, that isn't what I presented. And then he put it with Kevin Ryan's wrongful termination case. He got that muddled into it, and also the judge said he wasn't going to hear a case about who shot JFK or what landed on the moon. Excuse me, sir, that isn't what this case is about either. Have you read the case?
so who bought
And
off that judge, or was he
also
threatened?
threatened me that I wasn't to appeal it. Well, that's illegit.
I'm just wondering about the
Uh,
judge and how they co-opt these judges and how they get them to
Well, I didn't
corrupt
quite
them.
get it until we get to the Court of Appeals. And now, also they dismissed it because of airplanes or something. My case has nothing to do with airplanes, but what they did was join my case and Morgan's case and another case all together so they could dismiss my case because of airplanes and other things, that had nothing to do with my case. And so when I appealed it, Morgan didn't appeal his because we didn't need to have, that same muddle up. Only my case was appealed, so they couldn't muddle it up. And then there's this other act of Congress that had come to place, because remember the bailouts for
Yes.
the savings and loan situation? They wanted to make sure that there was accountability, and so the federal QTAM cases were being dismissed illegitimately, and so Congress restated what the law was, and they call it FERA, Fraud Enforcement Recovery Act. And every case that was pending as of this date, it applied to. My case was one of them. So FERA applied to my case. And what it was, you didn't, before they were dismissing cases based on, well, you have to show, one premeditation and exactly where they were standing and where the minute hand was on the hour hand was and the minute hand on the clock and exactly where the second hand was on the clock and exactly what they were thinking at that moment to have this case go forward. I mean, that's ridiculous. You can keep, having requirements on and on until that's how they keep cases from going forward. And they didn't want the accountability of the savings and loan stuff to get, lost by the wayside. So they restated what the the whistleblower lawsuits were about. And which is you have to show the fraud was involved, and you have to be the first one to submit a case. So
Hmm.
everybody and their cousin's uncle can't submit a case. After they hear it's the end thing to do. Now the first person who brings this forward and it does the whistleblowing and fraud. Well, I had was obviously the first one to bring it forward to NIST, pointing out that they didn't investigate what happened. They just made a hypothetical scenario, a computer model. They did not investigate what happened, and they admitted to me that they didn't that their report was a fraud. They used that word, but everything but that word. That they were mandated by Congress to determine why and how the towers collapsed, but they didn't investigate what happened.
Hmm.
And so here I have an admission from this that fraud was involved, and I was obviously the first. So should go forward. But the Court of Appeals decided they were going to ignore that law so they could dismiss the case. And
Well,
but they were respectful because they even acknowledged that in their written decision. So when people say, "Oh, it was laughed out of court," no, it wasn't laughed out of court. It was respectful, but only at that moment did it hit me the magnitude of this case. If those judges had not dismissed the case,
hmm,
would they have been justified on the way home from work that day? Think about it.
I'm thinking it's.
Or even the first judge. If he came up with the wrong answer, what would happen to him?
Hmm. I
When
exactly.
corruption gets to be so humongous, it, the court systems just can't handle it because you can't just have a handful of judges being responsible for all of this. Now, go to the Supreme Court business. Those people want to live out a nice, happy life. If they don't make the decision that the crew wants them to make, are they going to live out a nice, happy life?
The tie-in here with the present situation, and I can only hope that people are going to be able to break through this barrier that has been here for eons. I mean, this deep state, whatever you want to call it, the crew that have manipulated and controlled everything in our life, including the aftermath of an horrific event like 9/11. They control everything. They control Dr. Judy. They control anybody that comes out with proof,
Oh, they
evidence.
try to. You got to be careful when you say that. I'm probably the least controlled, but
They
their
try.
control mechanism is to marginalize me.
Well,
They don't
they
control my
try.
actions so much as, of course, I know it's futile to stick my neck out further because I just get more marginalized. And if I really start making progress, then they do something about it. Whatever my book is getting, the chatter about my book is rising and is getting too good. You see another campaign of trash posts on YouTube of harassment stuff about how horrible Judy Woods is. It comes in cycles. So like when they need to control public opinion, they just put out a lot more trash. So when somebody does a search on my name, up comes the trash, and so
Hmm.
they don't pursue things further usually.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I really appreciate you doing this and helping people to understand things in context, because no matter how they try to shadow ban or whatever they're tried to do to this channel, which is it just seems to be everything under the sun. So I just ignore it and carry on and hope that we can continue streaming. But the point is
Oh,
that
can I tell you about the duck guy? I've mentioned him before in his channel.
yes.
And shadow banning. Oh, it was horrendous. He had his whole channel removed. All the videos he spent, it messed up his life badly. Because those videos he was advertised, the what do you call it, uh, hatchery where he got all the free chicks from, and they even shipped them at their cost to the duck guy in Canada, so he could raise these for food for the homeless. And so they did that because they would get free advertising on all his videos that would be up there, for eternity or whatever. And all those videos were removed, so they don't get their advertising. for having done this do-gooder thing of giving this guy all these baby chicks and shipping them to him. But
We
we're
have an
talking about
idea
over
about
a
that too,
thousand, like
because
a bunch.
when we talked about it, we were talking.
So anyway, they just delete, and then there's 3 strikes and you're out, and you can't, you know, and they all happen in one day, and you can't uh, uh, what do you call it?
Appeal.
Argue it. What's the word for appeal it? You can't appeal it. It's pretty bizarre. It's kind of like uh, dictatorship. And so he was looking into it more and more, and then figuring out ways to, his life was toast. Um, with everything he'd built up, and growing these ducks on his lake and so forth to feed homeless, enjoying doing it, and all these streaming videos where you can see how to fix fences and other interesting things. Turns out what happened was these animal rights people, some PETA folks, decide they're gonna attack him, and they just started filing bogus claims
Mm-hmm.
uh, about saying that that he was showing grotesque stuff and showing torturing animals and make up whatever they make up, and YouTube doesn't look into it. They just take the video down and they have a strike against you,
And I
and so you
wonder
three
too.
strikes and you're out.
Yeah, I wonder if
And
those.
after what?
Sorry. I wonder if those people are, like in my case, some of the people that make those kind of complaints are on the inside and that are now being shown to be part of the a group on YouTube that is put there specifically to
For that purpose.
for that purpose, because the person that has continually been my nemesis is he's in court with a bunch of other people right now, and he's always seems to be winning. He's got money behind him. He's able to just defame people apparently by just going on his channel and
And
talking
you
about
can
people.
get anything, and as we've seen in the political news lately, you can get anything and spin it to a totally different context.
Hmm.
But there's no substance to it. But they have enough tidbits to make it believable. Oh, he has ducks and he does this and that, and then but they change the perception of it. Like he almost drowned the ducks. No, it was happened to be raining that day. That's why they're wet. The
Well, they'll
ducks
say
like
things like
being out in
if
the
you
rain.
like on our a couple of the shows that we've done, I showed the towers dustifying, and there was a time when that was considered to be okay. You could just it's just a short video, but that's considered stealing by some people, and yet other people can show this and more, and it's considered to be fair use. And so they target people, and they're targeting this show for sure, which is why when we put things up on the screen, it's boring right now. Well, not boring. We're on your website. It's very exciting. But you don't get to see the videos. And so I'm encouraging people to go over to characterdriven.com, join the community, and I'm putting up other videos
Is because you just are
to.
avoiding all of the excuses they use. But can you imagine that with this duck guy? I mean, it's like the most harmless thing, and you get to. He's got this streaming video. You can watch the ducks as they're getting older. They're first day old or something, and then they're there at the water feeder. I mean, you can see him every day changing the barn, raking out stuff, putting on the garden, then putting new straw in for him. He did very good care of these things.
I
You
think
can
what we
see,
figured
every
out
square inch of the place, and know that.
what we
And
figured out
it's just
was
it's
that
just fun and relaxing to watch, nature kind of.
yes.
Or just speaking of mothering, the baby ducks sometimes will slip and flip over on their backs. They can't right themselves. And there was a goose who'd walk along, bring up the rear, and be flipping them back.
That's cruelty to animals.
No,
I,
no, just turn them back upright because that's
I,
what little ducklings do. They
just
fall
kidding.
over, and the mother, rights them. But here it was a goose going along flipping them.
Well,
But
don't want to
if
see
somebody
nature.
wants to do something, so we have that kind of culture now where people make up stuff and twist stuff, and then manufacture stories and then mislead people into making the wrong assumptions. But this, Russia collusion business, never any evidence. No
No.
real evidence. Then there's this manufactured fake stuff, and then trying to smear somebody with lots of this. Yeah, we know it well. We know how it works.
Well, they're
I
definitely
mean,
running
we have so much
scared.
junk out there that people don't know how to find a needle in a haystack.
When I see people like Brennan and all these people that are lashing out, I think, well, they must be picking the scab off because they're being exposed for what they are. And it's scary because it's
Who's
the first
that?
time. Oh, he used to be the head of the CIA, and now he's told
What
Trump
name? What
to.
name were you talking about? I didn't hear the name.
John Brennan.
You turned away from the mic. Who?
John Brennan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, but
threatened
to do
Trump a
what
few
they've
times.
done, it's like they thought they'd get away with it, but they like the way Comey has stated stuff. It's like in his mind he believes it, and he doesn't explicitly lie, but he implicitly lies.
Well, I'm going to
You know,
say
you hear
that.
about going to court and telling the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth. Misleading truth is not truth; it's a lie.
Well, a lot of what he's doing right now is just a lie because it's a
Yeah,
contradiction
it
to
is
what.
plain outright lie. You know, saying he doesn't know, or but the deal about the bedwetting business or the peeing in beds.
The
You know, what a
bedwetting.
weird
I'm
thing to
sorry.
bring up.
I'm
That you
sorry.
know, he says, well, it could be true. It's possible. It's not impossible. You know, he's not saying he knows it's true. He
Oh,
doesn't
I
know it's true. He knows it's false.
well the the sin of omission, as you were saying, sometimes it's what you don't say, and they did know that it was being funded by Clinton, the DNC, and now he's saying, well, actually it was the GOP that
Republican Party or something. But no, it wasn't.
and that's a complete and utter lie because all it is
But
this.
it's his interpretation based on another string of assumptions that go around a circle. So that if you put him, you know, on the witness stand, he'd have some perturbed way of explaining it away. Oh yeah,
Hmm.
the Republican Party said such and such 5 years ago about something, and that's what started this. You know,
Hmm.
it's that kind of idea, but they didn't pay for it. That's
Yeah.
but
I,
you know, he has this Boy Scout image, and that's another thing that parallels 9/11. I'm probably offending people, but they need to get over it. The thing with Stephen Jones, that was in that first article that Morgan and I did. Morgan wanted to put in that part. He pushed for putting that in. I wasn't that uh, bold, but he put in there about Jones the Boy Scout. Vote for me. I think that was the title of that section. Stephen Jones would try to bring forth the Boy Scout image, and people would fall for it.
yep. And that's
And
why
so,
people,
go
they
ahead.
look at image. They look at, someone like Trump who's bombastic, and we all know that. The thing is that he's definitely out there. What I love about it is that you know exactly what he's saying
Yeah,
because people.
what you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. And, I'm so tired of the schmoozing because you look at someone like Comey and you just know that he is covering up for so many people, not just himself. And they will all turn on each other when it comes right down to it. And that's the slime ball world that we live in right now. And yeah, I'm probably offending people, but, don't come here if you don't want to be offended. This is
But
not snowflake
it's
territory.
if you get to looking at facts, not at emotions, or the end justifies the means. So yeah, but he had to be a bad person. How many people believe that Trump was a bad person because of some video that somebody uh, recorded unknowingly? You know, it was a locker room chit chat, but Trump was not claiming it's something he did. He was just joking how, you know, women throw themselves at him, and because he's famous or something like that. And it just kind of hamming it up locker room style, thinking it was a private conversation.
Hmm.
And I bet you go to, you know, junior high locker room talks, you get a lot of that stuff. It's
Well,
not something for, you know, public whatever. And why did somebody record it, and how did it get to where it got to be on air? And why is everything based on that? He did nothing. He didn't rape anybody. He didn't sexually assault anyone. But those who have sexually assaulted and raped, ones, that's perfectly fine. That's a personal matter.
Right.
It's this end justifies the mean mentality.
Well, it depends on what you
It
mean
end
by the word
justifies
it.
the means. But I was speaking of Clinton, in case people didn't realize that. Why was it okay for somebody to lie under oath?
Because
Depending on what the meaning of the word
they're
is.
going along they're going along with the program, and that's what's happening right now. Is you've got people that are not and have been put into place. I have no doubt that people have been put into the places that they are right now to do exactly what they're doing, which is to uncover
Hmm.
the, let's say, the truth. I'm having a hard time with that word, but I'm what the reality is. Whether it's the truth or not is not the point. It's that people can start to see
The
that there's a
facts.
reality behind what they think is happening. There's a whole
Well,
world behind
here's
that.
another example with 9/11, and to Andrew Johnson's credit, uh, when it was brought to his attention, he looked back and, why did I do that? In the scholars group, he'd been sucked in there, lured in there, and you want your enemies inside your tent, peeing out rather than outside peeing in, as the phrase goes. And keep track of them better. Well, Stephen Jones was recruiting people to do his dirty work for him. They wanted these two videos spliced together. There's a time gap removed, so that it looked like that orange stuff pouring out of the building. It looks like it happened immediately before the building went poof. Where in fact that was not the case. It poured out of one window, stopped, poured out of a different window, stopped. Some time went by, and then the building went poof. But he wanted that time gap out of there. Wanted these videos spliced together. So Andrew, as a team player, went ahead and spliced them together. And that was one of the things I showed Morgan in that trip I did to his place. Like, here's example of fake information. It's slanted data, tampered with data to coerce public opinion a certain way. And then that was in the article. And then when Andrew read the article, he says, "Oh, that was me. Oh, why did I do that? Oh my gosh." He
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize he'd been conned into that until reading our article. And there's another case where there's a beautiful picture of the spire dustifying. That's the remaining core columns. And Stephen Jones had somebody, I'm guessing had somebody else, crank up the contrast to the point you just see light specks. So you totally look past and ignore the fact that, or you don't even see the fact that the thing's turning to dust. And he said, see the thermite, see the thermite. So you have these, little bright spots because he has the contrast cranked up so much. And so when people see that picture, the original where you see the dustification, they see, oh, that's the thermite. It's like flashcard, learning. And there's another one where he claimed they're appearing in hot molten metal in the ground. No, that's the guy's flashlight out of his pocket. It was a segment from a frame from a video, and somebody had tampered with somebody, we don't know who, had tampered with it and turned it orange to make it look like fire color, where it was just a white light flashlight
Hmm.
out of somebody's pocket. It was a long time exposure, taken at night.
Yeah. It,
So
it
there's things like that. So think of all these people who participated unknowingly, and now
right.
their hands in it, and they've done some of the dirty work, and they're involved without consciously becoming involved. And then now what do they do? I'm relaying this as parallel to um, the Trump political whatever.
Yeah. And going
That people are so convinced that Trump is evil that they start fabricating, you know, evidence against him without realizing that's what they're doing. I can see how that can happen.
And I don't know why people even buy into so much of it. It's unbelievable to me because they get so much on that sort of line of thinking that they'll say something like Stormy Daniels, and you're supposed to respond a certain way. And I just go, "What about it?" And
Tennis shoes,
let's
tennis
just say
shoes,
that it actually happened. The guy had
shoelaces.
sex 10 years ago outside his marriage. That is not good. You're right. That is not a nice thing to do to your wife. Let's just say it happened and have it over with because I don't want to hear anymore about it. And
Or
say,
whether it, whatever did or didn't happen, did not, did to, did not, did to. I saw it first. I did not. What are we talking about that for? Get back to the, what's important.
and it's exactly how
And
they did the cover up in terms of 9/11 and
and
your
that's how
book.
cover-ups work. It's
Yes,
keeping you from looking at the evidence. As I've often said, if you don't like live behind door number one, the 19 bad guys with box cutters. Oh, they'll show you the lie behind door number two, thermite. And if you don't like that lie, oh, they'll show you the lie behind door number three, mini nukes. And if you don't like that one, they'll show you the lie behind door number four. So people are busy watching the bouncing ball instead of turning around and looking at the wide open field of evidence right behind them. Because
exactly.
they look at where they're being told to look. Oh, Stormy Daniels, tennis shoes, the shoelaces, whatever the details are, and that distracts them away from the heart of things. The parallel again of that with 9/11 is, well, what about the airplanes? And what happened to passengers? Uh, I'm talking about what happened to buildings.
Which is why you don't get
Well,
into that because it
yeah,
distracts again.
because it's
You're
just
trying to
a
keep people on.
total distraction.
Yeah,
Real airplanes can't turn buildings into dust in midair, and neither can fake airplanes. So why are we talking about airplanes? I want to talk about what happened to buildings. But what about the passengers? They don't turn buildings into powder midair either. So let's get back to what happened to the buildings. That's what my book. Excuse me, my book is entitled. Where did the towers go? Not where the people in the airplanes go.
hmm
That whatever happened, that's a different scenario. I called that the getaway car, like from bank robbery. If you're
hmm
focused on the getaway car, you're not paying attention to what happened at the bank robbery. It wasn't a stolen car, or was a stolen car, or whatever. But what does that have to do with the bank? Somebody robbing the bank. Did they rob the bank? Yes or no?
Have you
It,
noticed that this is the part that gets us into trouble the most? Because I'm just thinking about this. I guess one of our private conversations, we were talking about how I get into trouble, and I said, because often I'll say something that people don't want to hear. It's often a solution, or I go back to evidence or something that is just okay. We're talking about this right now, okay? And what happens is people get really angry at me. I'm just using my personal
what about
situation.
this? What about that? What about the
Yes,
fire hydrant on the corner? What
and
about the hubcap across the street?
right.
And
We keep
what
going
about
back and we say, "I'm
yeah?
talking about this right now. Let's just focus on this." And people get literally angry because they want to move from here to here to here to here. And I think this is the psyop of
Machine
ADD.
gun
I've
fire.
been
Right.
diagnosed
If
with
one thing isn't working for them, they want to jump to something else.
right, and ADD is the perfect way of saying, well, we don't have the ability to focus. And I've been diagnosed as a person with ADD, but it doesn't mean that I can't focus and I can't think about something logically if given the opportunity. Whatever we need to do, we have to go back and look at the evidence. And it's sorry, I just wanted to mention there's somebody in the chat too that says that they love your courage. They also say that I'm in the no
Thanks.
planes camp, which I just wanted to address because that's exactly what we're trying to work through here. That we're not in camps.
We're not.
That
Yeah,
we're
yeah. It isn't like this camp against that camp. It's like we're just looking at the evidence.
and it's not a criticism. It's just what seeing. This is called the Psyop recovery program, so that you can just take a look at even the words. I do this too, where I say, the planes, or sorry, the buildings went away or whatever. You have to learn
Or
how
fell
to.
down. Yeah, when the buildings fell down or
I
something.
say fell down
Yeah, no, they
sometimes.
didn't fell down. They're gone. They went away.
And so this is what Dr. Judy teaches me all the time. And I've been at this for quite a long time and heard her and taught to her. And yet I use this kind of language that it's like saying my cancer. I stopped saying my illness because it's not mine. We don't own it. We happen to have been diagnosed with an illness, right? So it, don't be in a camp. Don't put yourself into a group. Be very careful about keeping yourself, keeping the integrity of being your own person, and having reasons for being that person. And having.
After almost 10 years of my book, of course, it didn't get published until 2010, so 8 years, but 10 years that it's been worked on. I'm really pleased with how I did the quote plane issue. Uh, is I talked about when the buildings got their plane shaped holes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say what caused them. I didn't need to go there. And some people reading it assumed that the airplanes made the holes. Other people reading it assumed something else made the holes. But I didn't need to address it. They just, they got these airplane-shaped holes at these points on the time, and look what happened at that time. Interesting. The Earth's magnetic field shifted at that moment. How interesting.
Right. Just looking at
But
all of the
but
confluence of events that were taking place. That if you look in the book, you'll see the seismic
yeah.
signals and all that sort of thing. It's things that make you go, hmm.
I like to joke that about the 9/11 Commission said that the first hole was at whatever time, and then the NIST report had a different time, and I think the um, Palisades seismic thing had a different time, and I like to joke and say I can tell you which one's right based on the magnetometer. I'm just being silly here. Based on the magnetometer data, it was between two of them. It wasn't outside that grouping. It's within 2 minutes, but the earliest and the latest are within 2 minutes, and there's one in between. The magnetometer one is in that cluster. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So just taking a piece of data. I'm not. A lot of people say, "Oh, she says that it took the building X amount of time to collapse." No, I don't ever say the building collapsed, and I don't ever say how long it took. I just say how long it would take billiard balls to fall down, and so you can make your brain go through the exercise and know that it took a whole lot longer. This said it was the ground shook according to the seismic signal 8 seconds for the north tower and a little bit longer for the south tower. Well, it takes 9.5 seconds to throw a billiard ball off the roof in a vacuum and have it hit the ground. So how can the ground only shake for 8 seconds? If no resistance of anything, it's the roof hitting the ground by itself with no wind resistance, it would take longer than 8 seconds. If the building turned to powder in midair, it wouldn't go thud. That's another, more evidence on that. So I don't see how long it did take or should have taken. As I say in my analogy, we don't have to prove how long it would take me to run 43 miles in passing by the dog track. I definitely don't need to also contemplate how much longer it would have taken me if I did stop at the dog track, because you can't run 43 miles in 2 minutes. So it just doesn't matter, Well, you got to calculate how much longer it would have taken if you stopped the dog track. That's my analogy with, you simplified, with the billiard ball thing. Well, what about this? What about air resistance? What about, what you see just with the billiard ball thing? Like if you drop a billiard ball just for timing, and like from the 110th floor, and the 100th floor can't start moving until the 110th floor billiard ball gets there to trigger it, and then the 90th floor can't start moving until the 100th floor gets there to trigger it. This is like making the assumption that 9 of every 10 floors is totally, destroyed. But that takes like 31 seconds, not 8 seconds. And right there you can see there's a problem with the timing story. about the building did not slam to the ground. And then we'll look at the rubble, and there's a lot of stuff to it.
Yeah, but
But
it didn't take any longer than 8 seconds, and so you don't need to talk about anything after the 8 second mark.
right. Well, what about air resistance? It's just like,
8 seconds.
yeah,
Just
if
eight
it can't
seconds.
do it with no air resistance, it surely can't do it with air resistance.
There's a question here from Cheeto Libero. I never know if I'm saying your name right. I'm sorry. Dr. Wood, could you please point to the legal document in which the U.S. Court of Appeals is denying your appeal by admitting they were ignoring the FARA to dismiss your case? Thanks. I don't seem to find it.
It's on my website.
And we were at it. So I just wanted to say that maybe you
Yeah,
weren't here.
it's on there, and if um,
It's under key 10.
it's in a footnote in one of the pages.
Okay. I was
They
there.
acknowledge that FARA applied to this case, but for I think the statement for the ease of writing the dismissal for the case, they were ignoring it.
I'm whipping down the page. I'm sorry, you guys. I mentioned earlier that we only use Dr. Wood's website or things that we own because otherwise we're being banned for this, that, and the other thing.
I don't advise digging that out because I think if we're quote mining. You need to have somebody look at the context of the whole thing. If they are really interested in it, they can look through it. But for the initial thing, because there's a lot of gobbledygook in there, for the initial dismissal, in a quick review of sort of an overview of the case, a good one to start with is motion to reconsider. That's the last stage before it went to the Intermediate Court of Appeals.
What I notice is some of the links when you get further on in the website, sometimes they don't work. So I'm going back to the. So if you couldn't find it, Tito, perhaps it's because you need to go back to the first page and do what I'm doing. If you can see what I'm doing, I'm going down to the bottom. Hopefully this will work.
And at the top, if you go to the key 10 page, at the top there's like a bunch of PDF things, and you can
I was
find
just
it that
there.
way. You can download the PDF.
Right.
But the motion to reconsider one is actually there in web page form as well.
Sorry for making that go by so fast, folks. It's like being on a little ride. Anyway, so Cheetah, if you take a look at the top of the page, I just went back to the first page, and then I went down to the bottom, and then I went back to the top, and you can see where it says Ketem case page, and then I clicked on that, or Ketem case, I think it says. Clicked on that. Here I am. And then if you go down the page, as Dr. Wood said, you want to take a look at the actual documents and put them in context so you're not just picking and choosing. It's really important to do that. Just like when you're reading her book, you need to go from beginning to end and go all the way through it.
Yeah, go through it. But just for the ease of getting started, I think that that motion to reconsider is a good summary of this. My lawyer asking the judge as nicely as he could. Judge, you said that you weren't going to hear a case about who shot JFK or what landed on the moon. Maybe you misunderstood what this or misapprehended what this case was about.
Misapprehended.
Uncle Reed again.
Yeah, that's good.
He did as nicely as he could, but it is addressing the the dismissal stuff, which was and to even referring to Kevin Ryan's bombs in the building business is bogus.
Bogus. Paul Cargo wants to know, are you a legally recognized quote-unquote whistleblower?
Yes. Otherwise, I would have been able to file the case. And
Good
I wasn't,
call, Paul.
what do you call it, sanctioned for filing a bogus case wasting the court's time.
That's what a Ketem case is. You're basically acting on...
Yeah, it's a whistleblower case. So I qualified because I was the first to file the request for corrections to NIST. So I'm telling a government agency that they were defrauded by their contractors. and here's what their contractors did wrong. So I'm telling them, they're defrauded. It's the equivalent of a doctor who double bills Medicaid twice and bills Medicare also and collects three times. And if you tell the government agency this doctor is triple dipping here, you're saying this guy defrauded, and it's taxpayer money that's going out.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting is a key time case was also filed by Floyd Landis because Lance Armstrong, when it became fashionable, Lance Armstrong was paid by the U.S. Postal System, a government agency, and he defrauded them.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was using that the funding to buy drugs and to cheat.
To cheat. Yeah, to go against the rules
And
of
so
the
Floyd Landis
organization.
filed a key tam case. But see, that one was politically correct. Mine wasn't. So that one got to go forward.
Yes. So, um, I have a question and I can't quite think of it, but Cheeto has been able to find the site, so that's great. I'm thankful for that. If you need any more help, let me know. And again, on characterdriven.com, I'm trying to put more resources there rather than have it here, because if any of this gets taken down, I want to have a repository where we can find it. And of course, the greatest repository is the website itself. It's a great archive of all the things that have been collected since I think you started in 2007. You said so. It's been
No, my stuff. Mine started in 2004, and I had that tripod site. It was a freebie site when I was cheap, and then it started doing pop-up ads, and pop-up ads became obnoxious. So Andrew agreed to provide me with the web space in 2007.
I see. Okay,
I
so this
moved it all to there.
particular
So it didn't start in 2007.
this
It started
incarnation.
in tripod site earlier.
There's a question from Mr. Geoflow. He's actually addressing Cheeto. It says he couldn't find the statement in those documents either, and he says keep searching. He's speaking to Cheeto. Now, if you can't find the specific statement, is there some more? You're saying don't pick and choose the statements, but they are trying to find it
It's yeah.
in
Well, see, you're
context.
still trying quote mine, and then that's taking things out of context. But if you want to, like you say, oh, she's lying. No, if you want to just
I don't think
tell
that's
that,
yeah.
determine that's not the case. You can search on the word. I think uh, acknowledge. I think that's in there. They use the statement. Well, I quoted it in my book. I think. Let me see.
Yeah, if you could find it, that would be helpful. I think
And
they're actually
actually, if you go to my book, you can. The link is to the right thing in the book, on the author's preface.
okay. Let me just.
I discussed that. Okay, let's see.
I've got a squeaky chair, you guys.
Open it open. And I have the things. Okay, need a magnifying glass.
Okay, now tell me what page it
He
is.
woke up. Why you sit down?
Chickies.
You're being a nice patient, chickie. Let's see.
Sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, guys. I'm just working on it.
Okay, I'm just starting to read in the middle of a sentence here. Okay, a civil case involving classified technology cannot be. Okay, that's something else. Perhaps this is why the United States Court of Appeals, in their written decision,
I think mostly what people
respectfully
want to do.
acknowledged that the law FERA applied to this case, but
Yeah,
quote
he
for the
says.
ease of unquote
Just a sec. I'm going to overtalk you for a
dismissing
sec.
the
Cheeto, I
case.
don't think that she was saying that you were lying. I think that it was, or
Oh no,
looking
no!
to see that
Some
she
people
was
say, "Oh,
lying.
she's making
I
that
think
up,"
it's
and if you
just
want to, if that's you're trying to just verify that for your
no.
own sanity, uh, you
It's
can,
to be able to show other people, I would assume. A lot of people are here so that they can get the information to be able to
yeah, but I think
quickly.
it's important to read through the document. But
Of course.
they if you know what's going on in the media right now about the going after Trump business and collusion and all that, it's the same type of thing. it's like, well, she didn't say what second hand on the clock was where, and but I didn't need to. That was the whole thing with FERA. But the
Well,
fact they ignored FERA,
I want to
and
mention
they put
that because I think
they're not abiding by the law as Congress wrote it.
if people haven't been through this themselves, they don't understand at all. And of course, I don't understand either to the extent that any other person does that's been
Here it is.
targeted.
I give the
But
link in the
it's just constant.
thing. It's http://www.drjudywood.com/articles/NIST, all caps,
Okay.
then key _tam wood
Yes,
dot shtml.
that's where I am. That's
Okay.
exactly where I am. So now I'm going to slide down to the bottom, and you're going to see there's a bunch of PDFs there. Is there a specific PDF that we should be looking for?
But
Sorry about the
it
squeaky
say
chair.
the Court of Appeals decision on.
Okay, it says Cheeto says he or she can't find the entire document denying the appeal. Okay, Mr. Geoflow, author's preface, page 33, footnote number 4. Thank you, guys. This is really great. It's good to have this kind of exchange because it's by having this information and having it clear in your head as to what's going on here that we're able to spread to other people the realities of the situation. Because a lot of people will say, oh, all we need to do is have another investigation, or they're calling for an investigation. That is a cover-up. And it's a cover-up directly
And also, Richard
geared
Gage has
toward.
called for it. He's only calling for one that considers bombs in the building. So guess what that does? It sets you up to fail.
You start from a premise and you work your way back instead of looking at the evidence and allowing
Yeah.
it
So
to
let's
lead.
say he'll only consider Martians having done it. Well, it's going to prove false or whatever. Well, let's say rubber bands or something. Martians, you can't prove what you can't. You don't know. But let's say rubber bands or something like that. Whatever, bubble gum. Then they disprove it, and then where are you? Oh, see, they're dishonest. They're dishonest. That's what Gage is setting people up for, is to feel like they're shortchanged, but it keeps them in a cul-de-sac rather than here's the evidence. The contractors for the NIST report, especially ARA, Applied Research Associates, are developers and manufacturers of energy weapons. So they would be able to recognize the use of an energy weapon. Not only that, they were paid by a government agency to know everything about any weapon of mass destruction that has been developed or is being developed anywhere. So they not only know what technology, but whose technology. Now, wouldn't it have been fun to put them under oath?
Indeed.
And
I'm
when people say,
seeing
"Oh,
that.
you don't care about who did it," guessing doesn't accomplish anything. This is the closest that anyone has gotten to going after who did it. And so, why didn't anyone want to support that case? Because they didn't want to be banned from their Truther Club. That's what groupthink does.
Indeed, and this is exactly what we see right now when we see somebody like John Brennan saying, just stay tuned, Mr. President, or whatever whatever it is he was saying.
We're going to get
and
you yet.
The threats.
Did not, did not.
Yeah, because they start off with a fake dossier, and that's verifiably true at this point. You can sort of take a look at it. I really recommend that you listen to something like Dan Bongino. He had a good show yesterday that it just explained it, the circular argument that goes on here. And they basically, what they do is they put forward this lie, and then they make it so that if you refute the lie, then it looks like you're trying to cover up something. It's very insidious.
Yeah, you're being defensive.
You're being defensive, and this is exactly the tactic that's been used in this situation. And you divide people up.
Those who can recall the Greg Jenkins event, same thing. And I didn't appreciate it at that moment. But my lawyer said, no, don't defend it. Just let it go. And I, huh? This idiot Greg Jenkins thing, the way that they distorted everything, and he was right. If I defended against it, I'm looking guilty.
Do you see how that works? It works in every case you can
It's a
imagine.
win-win for them.
It works in the family situations where somebody will set you up and say something about you, and as soon as you say, well, that's not true, then now you look like you're covering something up,
I
even
did
though
not. Yeah.
exactly. It's the oldest trick in the book, and all of us can probably relate to it to some extent or another. There was a question about the word conspiracy theory, and I wonder if it's a problem possibly with English not being the first language. But Bjorn wants to know, he says people refer to conspiracy theory these days. Strange word. Why include conspiracy in the word? Can you explain
Well,
that to him?
I explain in my author's preface why that term does not apply to my work.
And I'm right here. So it just reminded me of his question. It's on that
Yeah.
same page that
Let's see. Should I try
Jo-
reading it? Let's see if I can open the book back up again, and
yeah, it's
maybe
on
I have to put on
30,
different set of glasses and magnifiers here.
32. So it's the same page that GeoFlow, I think it's
Yep.
GeoFlow,
Let's see if these
mentioned.
glasses should help. All right. Let's see. Chicky's left
Sorry,
sleep.
Bjorn. I'm
I have
hoping
to
that
take them out.
I'm trying to
Okay. Many
represent you
people have
well.
speculated who committed the crimes of 9/11 and or how they did so. But without addressing what happened, speculation of this kind is nothing more than conspiracy theory, a phrase that also describes the box cutter story we were given by noon on 9/11/01. My own research, not speculation, is a forensic investigation of what happened to the WTC complex on 9/11. I don't address who did
Who
it,
did it?
nor am I concerned with that question right now. Before issues of that kind can be addressed, we must first determine what happened. And that is the objective of my research. By definition, research that is purely empirical cannot be about and has nothing to do with conspiracy theory of any kind. The fact that others in the mainstream media, in the alternative media, and the so-called 9/11 truth movement promote various theories about 9/11 is irrelevant to my research. On the other hand, to determine what happened, we must address all of the available evidence. Anyone declaring who did what or how they did it before they have even determined what was done is merely promoting either speculation or propaganda. The popular chant 9/11 was an inside job is, scientifically speaking, no different from the chant that 19 bad guys with box cutters did it. Neither one is the result of a scientific investigation supported by evidence that would be admissible in court. Neither
Exactly.
identifies what crime was committed or how it was committed.
I
So
think
let us
that's
consider the body of empirical evidence that must be explained in order to determine what happened.
that's the key thing is would it be admissible in court? And it's a very simple thing to look at if you keep that in mind when you're thinking about the evidence, because take it to a lawyer and just say, I think I know who did this. And they'll say, okay, come back to me when you have some evidence. And this is exactly what they do with someone like Trump. They start with the person and then they find the crime to fit that. And that's called fascism. That's exactly what fascism
Another example of
is.
that is the Casey Anthony thing.
Hmm.
She may or may not have killed her kid or intend to kill her kid. That was never even established. They just tried to get the jury to assume and make the jump as to her guilt, but they had failed to um, solve the crime. What happened? They hadn't ever established that. They just wanted you to think she was guilty because she's a bad person.
So if
See, we have these pictures of her playing and dancing in the nightclub when her kid's missing. That proves that she's a bad mother. Well, whatever that excuse was, but that doesn't determine what happened to the kid.
So is it conceivable when you think about someone like the Casey Anthony situation, is it conceivable that we may never solve that crime and therefore never find somebody responsible? Is it our need to find people responsible for things that happen
I think
psychologically?
what's important is to first determine what happened. That's more important than anything. And I have my own speculation, and just in the past year, I heard the judge from that case, and he had the same speculation. Isn't that interesting?
Kind of pass this along. Okay, I have another.
My speculation comes from knowing that, there are mothers or babysitters who want to watch TV. Babysitter wants to watch TV, so she gives the kid cough medicine or sleeping medicine or something. So the kid's quiet and they can watch the TV. Let's say Casey Anthony gave her kid some, cough syrup or sleeping medicine, so the kid would be asleep, so she could go off and to a party club. And let's say the mom wanted to do the same thing, so she gave the kid medicine to make it sleep. And let's say the dad thought the same thing, and he wanted to watch ball games, so he gives the kid sleeping medicine. And it turns out the kid overdosed and died. None of, that is not premeditated murder. It's irresponsible, careless. You say it's manslaughter. But it wasn't. They did not intend to kill the kid. It was some idiot dumbness. And there are a lot of cases where babysitters and stuff do drug the kids just to get to go to sleep early so they can do their homework or whatever they're going to do, which is horrid, but it happens. And so if you don't prove what happened, how the kid die, was it deliberate premeditated murder, or was it this other scenario? And if you haven't determined those, you haven't determined the crime. If you don't know what happened, how do you? As one of the jurors put it so well, Jennifer Ford said, "How can you convict somebody of what was the crime? If you don't know what the crime is, how can you convict somebody of it?"
And we can be thankful for that particular way of looking at things because otherwise, every one of us is vulnerable. And I look at this, the
Hmm.
Trump situation or any other, people going
It's a witch
into
hunt. It becomes a
the
witch
Cohen
hunt.
office or, finding a way to get information on us. It could be any one of us. And if we don't uphold those kinds of laws, then we are making ourselves vulnerable to the same tactics. And that's what they are. They're fascist tactics that have been used over the years, finding excuses to rummage through our stuff. And now it's just all online. I have to ask you this as a follow up. Mr. Geoflow says, yes, in the book, the Court of Appeal statement is partially quoted in footnote 4 there, but the URL simply leads to the general Ketam
Okay,
page.
but
I
did
did
he,
not
did he
find the
find
actual
the
PDF.
particular document?
So, can you remind me of what the document is, Mr. Geoflow, so
It's
that
it's the Court of Appeals decision denial.
okay, so Cheeto is saying he has the same problem where maybe it's not uploaded. They're wondering if the particular thing they're looking for.
I'll look at it by next week
Okay, that's great. Thank
because
you
I
so.
don't have a connection to the thing right now.
Thanks to everyone who's asking, and thanks to Dr. Judy who's willing to answer these questions and figure it all out. Because sometimes, uh, sometimes things aren't there that we think are there, and I don't know.
Here's another thing I like about my website is it hasn't been updated for forever. That if somebody wants to get it taken down because it's offensive or this or that, how did it suddenly become offensive?
Yeah, yeah.
It's the exact thing that's been up there for eons.
You're welcome, Cheeto.
You know,
I think that that's why we're here to basically to put things into proper context. I think reading the book helps a lot, but there are things that I had questions about, and I have the advantage of being able to ask, and this is what this show is about, to be able to ask. And as I say,
yeah,
I'd love
sometimes
to.
it takes reading the book several times. The first time you go through it, you're not quite sure where it's going, and you're busy sort of fighting the information and then seeing that, yeah, okay, that might be that way, and then you get it all the way through. The next time when you go through, you can pick at a different level of it, and because now you've come to understand one thing for sure in your mind, and you aren't hung up on watching that. Now you can look at something else, and also look at the footnotes and things like that. And a third time through, just to make sure you didn't miss anything else. So I've heard from quite a few people that, at least 3 times is a good number. Because, yeah, at first you're saying, well, what about this and what about that? So that's distracting you as you're going through, but then that gets quieted as you go through. You go, oh, now I get it. But meanwhile, you were so distracted by wanting to understand that you missed other things. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think people are particularly interested in the case in this chat today. And so it might maybe worth going back and taking a look at that again next week. We've done it before. We've done a show on the case itself. But I like these very specific questions so that those that obviously, I'm just
Also, I
thinking
think
that
maybe it's
Mr.
footnote 19 or page 19. I'm going back like 10 years remembering this, where the judge threatens me, not to appeal this.
And is
So
that
that was the original decision. Yeah.
is that in the transcript, or is it just something that happened
No,
that
it's
wasn't?
it's in the written decision from the George B. Daniels, Southern
Now,
District of New York.
okay, now that should be on your website then.
Yep, that's the
George,
that's the decision that uh, Jerry's motion to reconsider was written addressing.
okay, so it's in the motion to reconsider then.
But that discusses it, like it brings up that particular issue about threatening the.
Well, that could be the problem. Maybe folks are looking at the original document rather than the motion
Okay,
to
well, the
reconsider.
original is okay. The judge denies it, and then is the motion to reconsider, and then it goes to the Court of Appeals, and then the Court of Appeals responds. And then the last step is it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't have to deal with it unless they feel like it. Yeah, you know, say why they don't feel like it. They don't have to give a reason. Just they don't feel like it. So we took it as far as it would go.
Okay, so there's the motion to reconsider, then there's the actual document.
You're right.
Sorry
The
about my
web
chair,
page
you guys.
is an easier to access thing compared to the PDF file, but
Right.
it's the same thing. Another thing that people might find interesting, especially if you're hung up with Building 7, is when they came out with the Building 7 report. I did my response to that, and that's 7A, 7B, 7C. There's a 3-part thing that might even be linked from that page, but that's a fun thing to go through.
So if you want some fun, folks, go through
Yeah,
that.
because in the report they're describing this whisper quiet demise of the building, but how can you say it slammed to the ground?
I think it may be in this particular document.
You see it; it's near the top. I think this. I'm just going by memory. So you see a 7A, 7B, 7C. There's three links that takes you to those pages. There's also a downloadable form, but it's easier to view on the internet.
Um, all right. Well, I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to read the whole thing right now. I'll go over it. And hopefully if people kind of look at the motion to reconsider and then look at the actual case of the reconsideration decision, it will come up
Yeah,
in
and then
there.
look at the appeal after that. But the motion to reconsider addresses the most egregious things in the judge's decision on the lower court thing, and you see, he didn't deal with it with the case. So
I
people
just find
say it was
it
laughed out of court.
it's stunning to
Yeah,
me. Like, think about this,
it,
folks.
it,
How many of you have actually gone out, found something that needed to be addressed, and found out how you could deal with it in a court situation, did the court case, went back and did an appeal, and
And then went to the Supreme Court after that. Yeah.
on your own, out of your own pocket, with your
Well,
own.
with the wonderful help of just a handful of people, the financial thing. Because
Right,
the
and I
Supreme
know you
Court, you
won't
need to
say,
have lots of copies of it to hand around. Court of Appeals, you need a full set of copies of the whole thing for
and you
each one
don't
of them.
talk
But
about it.
the Supreme Court one is a different case altogether. It sort of starts over with this, like, really lightweight. So you don't have the whole thing in hundreds of pages. You just have 25 pages. Most of that is people listing various lawyers' addresses and, and affiliations.
I just find it
But
stunning, though, and I wanted to let the audience know this, that I absolutely respect you for the fact that you've done this. And if there was any leaf that was left unturned in any way, it was not for lack of trying. What this indicates is that there's a lack of interest in pursuing it, and the fact that people didn't know that you were doing this. I mean, this should have been headline news that Dr. Judy Wood has discovered this and is pursuing it in court. Heaven knows we hear all about, the other side and how they're pursuing their
it's not other
fictitious.
sides. Just the thermite crew.
I'm thinking about now with the DNC or all of these other specious
Yeah,
lawsuits.
just whoever's cranking stuff up to sound. However, they just care about public perception. I think
Oh, I'm sure they do, and they didn't want to
it's
draw
just
any
like the
attention.
thermite crew. They keep dribbling out something here and there to make it look like they're doing something, and they announce it like it's some big deal. But none of them have filed a federal QTAM case, or can
And
they?
what I find absolutely incredible when once you understand this is when you hear people who are on the alt media or anywhere else saying what we need to do is have an investigation. It just it
My,
makes
my
me
my
so
response to that is,
angry.
well, today's your lucky day. Here it is.
And that's really what you're saying about the book itself. I mean, that's really
Yep, that's a report of the new investigation.
that's what you say, I think, on the first page or right in the opening. Today's your lucky day. If you wanted to have an investigation, because here it is, and that formed the basis. That book formed the basis for your court case, and it is the
Right, the
kind of
court case was done first, and
yes,
this is, I took more time in tidying up the stuff, but basic information that was in the court case.
yes,
There's some other things that are in addition that weren't in the court case, like you know, the tornadoes or hurricane stuff, and the parallel evidence. But
yeah. You had gathered all of that together prior to the book, which is the book was sort of based
yeah, it's
on
like
that information.
2007, 2008.
Well,
Yep.
all of us were lounging about and looking at our TVs. I don't know what I was
But
doing in
but I
2007.
was getting that together while Fetzer and Jones and Gage were busy insulting me, and I just ignored that and did my work.
And I think that's exactly what Trump's doing right now. People say,
Yep,
or
yep.
Sessions, or any, you sort of see them.
Yeah, and actually, I make a kind of a snide remark about that on my FAQ page, just in case
Yes.
somebody needs to see that. Gage is wondering why she hasn't responded to this, why she hasn't responded to that. Well, I'll do it if I have spare time in my hands, but I'm busy with other more important things. What are you doing with your time?
Well, and
I do
again,
answer. I do answer. Some of it, but it's or I. Over time I have answered it. It just ludicrousness, but uh, you know why are they busy doing this other stuff for show? You know what a spiffy, snazzy site it is, but it's got no content.
and who's funding that? And that's
Oh,
the
well,
question
we
I
can
always
make
have.
up our, only they've taken in over a couple of $1 million.
Yep.
And they
It's
used to have this gauge on there, like a thermometer, like they do for March of Dimes collection. We've reached X number of dollars of our goal, and here's, for donating. And the thing never moved. And so they took it down. It
And the
implies
goal.
that they really weren't getting donations. But think of what donations do. They lock in the follower. If you've
Mhm.
donated to something, you're less likely to give it up. They go look elsewhere.
And what was the donation for again?
Whatever they were doing, and they would announce like before one of the particular things before um, 9/11 around Times Square, they were going to have a big billboard LED thing, which was like they needed $650,000 for it, something like
Uh,
that. Oh, and they just happened to get the donation the night before.
sheesh, because that's
But they didn't have
important.
any donations for months before then. But that's how their donations would go. Who knows where the money would come from? Just show up when they needed it. And
Well, I'd
then
cert-
Gage and company fly around the world giving these talks. All expense paid because of business expense. So
how what
various
sorry.
other things like he gave a talk once in England at a big fancy well-known architecture institute place, and he presented that as though they invited him there. No, he was renting the room, and because of that, they're not renting out that room anymore to anybody.
Oh, they're shysters. So
Yeah.
tell me this, tell people this. What would it take to mount this particular case again? You can't do the same case, but what kind of case could
Hey, it
people
seems that
mount?
law doesn't apply anymore. No, it's done with. This was and I totally admire Jerry Leapart, the lawyer head, for finding this avenue for a way of addressing it with the whistleblower thing. If you are a whistleblower, you can file a whistleblower case. And how do you become a whistleblower? I told NIST that the contractors were defrauding taxpayers. They didn't determine why and how the towers collapsed. It stayed right there in the report. They just made a hypothetical scenario. They didn't. One of the things I also said is their explanation does not uh, satisfy the laws of physics. Their collapse. And they said, oh, but they didn't analyze the collapse. So before it collapsed, the building behaved with the laws of physics, and after the towers were gone, they behaved the laws of physics.
But in between, it was not an
But we
issue.
didn't analyze the collapse, so it doesn't matter. So free of criticism there.
So if a
So
person,
in that statement, they're acknowledging fraud. They were mandated by Congress to determine why and how the towers collapsed. They did not do that. They hired ARA to basically do a hypothetical scenario, a computer model.
which is completely banal. I mean, the whole thing is. It's hard to even
Yeah,
know
but it's all
what to
about
do.
public opinion. Say, oh, we had NIST look into that, so therefore this is the correct answer.
And yet people are talking about bringing the people to court. Now, how
Who?
could they actually bring court to court? How could people do this? Is there any
Well,
possible
see,
way?
with my case, I had an avenue, which was that NIST report was fraudulent.
And there's no other way?
And so you can't sue a government agency, but you can sue the contractors of government agency for fraud. They're defrauding the American taxpayer
Only if you're a
because our tax
whistleblower,
money
though.
goes to that. And so I sued the contractors for the NIST report, and then I listed to NIST why they had committed fraud. And uh, that the case should have gone forward if somebody was obeying the law, because fraud was admitted by NIST that the report was fraudulent. They didn't determine why and how the towers collapsed. And the other thing is I had to be the first. Well, I think that I'm still the only that brought this evidence forward. So those are the only two things for the FERA. So there's no question that the case should have gone forward. But if they ignore FERA, then they go back to saying, well, you need to, determine when that person picked the pencil up and walked across the room, or whatever they want to put in there. It was
It,
limitless, and Congress did not want. You remember the bailouts in 2008?
Yes.
They didn't want that to go without accountability. So they said, no, we want, the, what do you call it, the whistleblower case to be what it was intended to. And then FERA was a motion to restate what that law was about. Is about fraud going forth. Here's an example: is making it simple. Um, let's say you're a mathematician
That's a joke.
and you're hired uh, by NIST to figure out something, to sharpen pencils. They ask you to sharpen pencils,
Mm-hmm.
and you sharpen pencils, and so and they pay you. But you're a mathematician. You see in that report while you're busy sharpening the pencils that they have that 2 plus 2 is 73, and that's not right. But then if you bring that up, you won't get paid for sharpening the pencils.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how they pull it off. That so but they weren't hired for being a mathematician. They're mathematicians, but they weren't hired for that. They're hired to sharpen pencils. So they did a good job sharpening pencils, so you can't say they committed fraud. But in this FERA, it's if you knowingly allow fraudulent information to go forward, and so that you can get paid, which is the pencil scenario. That's fraud. Allowing fraudulent information to go forward in the report. And so, if you're a mathematician, you would know that 2 plus 2 is not 73.
Right.
And so, but you know that if you brought that up, so they're having a rigged up report. But if you brought that up and pointed out their error, they're going to fire you. No, you just go back and sharpen the pencils and get paid.
So again, it comes down to money again, really, at the
Yeah,
very bottom line.
but FERA was, to keep them from getting out from that loophole, because that was a loophole that a lot of the contractors for government agencies were getting away with. They said, "Oh, but that wasn't my job. Even though I'm a mathematician, that wasn't my job. So uh, you can't get me for fraud." But what FERA, that's Fraud Enforcement Recovery Act, it was a statement that if you allowed fraudulent information to go forward, that's fraud
Hmm.
knowingly. So if you're a developer and manufacturer of energy weapons,
Just say.
and instead do this computer model of this hypothetical scenario of fire causing the building to go poof, and you're a manufacturer and developer of energy weapons. Also, you have this contract from the U.S. government to know anything about every weapon of mass destruction that is being developed or has been developed anywhere. So what technology it is. You can recognize it. You know whose technology it is. But you're just doing this computer model. You can see how it applies.
Yes.
Willful blindness is another term.
Oops, sorry.
They would know or should have known. You can download. Here's another example: is SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation. They were charged with typing up the report. You're just typists, right? Entering equations. uh, okay, forget the fact that their expertise is psychological operations. They put the report together. That
This is the
their
recovery room,
expertise
folks.
is psyops. Oh, but they just were typists entering equations into the report. They're typing up the report.
That's that's how you create a psyop. You do a lot of typing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it,
But you see how
you
FERA.
compartmentalize.
That's why why they wanted to stop that. But if FERA um, was applied, no, that they can't use that for an escape hatch.
Right. Speaking of typing,
Like SAIC was also in charge of security from 9/11 onward. So you remember all the dirt trucks, coming and going?
I do.
Yeah, they would know. Okay, where are those dirt trucks going? Oh, we were just in charge with locking up the gates.
it's there's things like that that people don't talk about, they don't notice, and you notice. It's unbelievable because these are such important things. The dirt trucks, for those that weren't involved in our dirt conversation, it's in the book. It's on the website. Uh, there's some things going on with the dirt.
How come when a building collapses, or supposedly collapses, you have this big mountains of dirt? And actually, the first responders said, "Man, as we dug down, the dirt got increased, in volume and became richer." So was that from all the potted plants in the building?
Well,
Where did the
that's the
dirt
only
come
thing
from?
that survived, and we got to keep the potted plants going. I mean, this is
Good.
crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I There's
But
people
that's
that have.
why the FERA statement that's it wasn't a new law. It was Congress restating the intent of the law that they put in place years earlier, which was, is there fraud, and is this person the first one to come forward, whistleblower? If those two things are yes, the case goes forward. But they didn't want the
Mhm.
case to go forward, so they had to say, well, we're going to ignore FERA. That's why that was such an important thing.
I really want people to be able to talk to you personally, and this is something that we've been threatening to do over the last little while. I want to let people know that to join, if you want to do this, I'm thinking about letting people ask you a question even today because there are people that are curious about the Ketam case, and it's hard to go back and forth. I'm just wondering if we can give them
But
the
that
the
backbone I just spelled out, that makes it pretty clear, doesn't it?
It does, but there's other specific things, and so I'm just wondering.
Of the evidence I submitted, no
Okay,
one refuted any of it.
no, of course they didn't.
They,
It
they, could,
says
they couldn't.
here's the question: why was SAIC slash Lidos LEIDOS, and then in brackets only SAIC at the time, and it's hard for me to read this. Not mentioned in the Ketam case. Did they make false claims? Do you understand that question? Because I don't
What
quite understand it.
in my case, it's mentioned. It's the whole laundry list. I think 23 different folks
Okay, so
that are
what your
mentioned.
SAIC is mentioned in the case
Yep,
then?
and ARA was the main one. They had the most number employees from ARA, of any contractor. So that's why that was the number one listing. So it was Wood versus ARA, or ARA versus whatever. That's why that was up there. But SAIC is, I think, the second on the list.
And so they're putting slash, so Lidos, LEIDOS is just another word for SAIC.
Yeah, they change their name when their reputation gets soiled. They just change the name again, or they have a company with lots of different branches. And this happened with something to do with Iraq and propaganda, because at that time the Smith-Mundt Act would not allow propaganda, and so they had a sub company, and then when they got in trouble, they just separated that company off. They changed the name. Keep on going. The same employees. They just okay, we're not in that company anymore. We're this other. It's another game that gets played. Well, speaking of those games, Comey apparently tried playing a similar kind of games,
Yes.
and where do you draw the line and say it was an intentional game playing, like something about his professor from whatever university it was that he leaked something to, but then he
Columbia.
made him an employee,
Yes.
and
And he
then
was also
did
his
something
lawyer.
else. Then said he's his lawyer, so it's lawyer client
Yeah.
privilege, or
Sort of
there's all
morphs.
sorts of loopholes he was building into it
Yes.
for obvious reasons. It's the same kind of thing. It's about the letter of the law, not the meaning of the law. Is how things have become. It's about what the meaning of the word is.
That's why I think we agree on the fundamental problem here is the lying that people have gotten into. It used to be that lying wasn't really a cool thing. Now it seems like it's just
Now it's
been,
if you can split hairs and redefine what the meaning word is, then you're in the clear.
and I
It's
don't
how you
think it's
play
a
the game rather
coincidence.
than the truth, and that's what's become sick.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the kids that are now adults and are the people that are having a hard time with the truth were brought up in the time of Bill Clinton when he
Oh,
was.
it's your perspective, your opinion. You all have you have your own truth, and it's just your opinion. The towers are still there; they're gone. Oh, that's your perspective. So
This is
they argue the towers back up by
this is
their
the
having their
scariest
opinion, and
thing about the world that we live in, is that people lie with impunity. It used to be that we could lie, but the courts are now they're involved in the whole lying pursuit here. They're not looking at evidence. They're not looking at the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. They're
what
looking
what
at
what
what they.
you won't ever hear anybody talk about, and first thing that comes to my mind, but you don't hear anybody talk about the word treason. Treason is about attacking the U.S. government.
Mhm.
And that's what the Smith-Mundt Act used to be. If you have one government agency attacks another government agency, that's treason. And that's why you couldn't have disinfo in a government report. But they modernized it so you can now.
Yay, we're advancing.
Yeah, but at the time I was gathering stuff together for the book, the old Smith-Mundt Act applied, so you knew that this stuff was in there. They could misinterpret it, but they couldn't Photoshop it and manufacture false data. Now they can. They've changed it.
Do you have any sense that a lot of the or some of these laws were changed as a result of your case? Is it, are you, I mean, am I just
I think
being,
it's just I just think it's our culture. It was changed in 2012,
you were
and see
saying
before
though,
then, you remember Fetzer. He had his dog and pony show in Vancouver, and what's his name? Gage had his in Toronto. Why
right,
just over
cross the border?
the border of the country?
Well, because the laws
And
changed
it's
in
a
the
U.S.
States.
event, 9/11. So why are you having hearings in another country?
Because the
Ah,
law,
you can't do propaganda on U.S. soil. That's it falls under the Smith-Mundt Act as it was, and those things were prior to 2012. Or Fetzer's was in June 2012, just before it changed, a few months before it changed.
well, again,
Now they couldn't
Obama
hold the
changed
U.S.
that specifically. He changed that specific act so that you could actually propagate
Well,
propaganda.
that isn't why they changed it. It changed, and then you could, you can now do propaganda on U.S. soil. But up until like August of 2012, you couldn't. So when Fetzer did his dog and pony show calling it the 9/11 hearings in Vancouver, yeah, he couldn't. He would risk getting in trouble for putting propaganda on U.S. soil. So he
Do you
put it in
think that that
Vancouver.
led to Obama's decision to change that the Smith-Mundt Act, though? Do you think that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of motivation. If you can't put out disinfo, you- you're
You're
you're kind of
stuck.
stuck. But then if you change the law so you can modernize it so you can put out disinfo, and then you're home free.
Yeah, I just find the timing kind of interesting here. It's
Well, a lot of stuff. The time, if you're going to try to destroy the country, you need to have an avenue where you can slither through
and of
to do
course,
it.
if you're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes with 9/11, you certainly don't want it revealed for what it is. I mean, you got to keep that under wraps
Yeah,
at all costs.
it's what I find is amazing with this stuff about the building a wall or reinforcing the border crossings or catch and release, or send them back home. If somebody comes into this country illegally, and then the Supreme Court stopping that, like, is it their quest to destroy the country? So let's do the analogy with your house. That's requiring you to leave your front door open and unlocked. Let anybody come in and feed whoever comes in.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, we're just lucky to be in a good country. And it's not their fault they live in a bad country. and it's yucky. Well, there's this other issue. Yeah, you apply for
Asshole.
asylum, do it the right way. But here's the other issue: is this is a good country? Why do you want to import the workings of a bad country into it?
Well,
We
there might be
want
a
to.
reason.
If the people want to come in, that's why they have to come in the right way, and they should assimilate, learn the language, not bring their country's mannerisms here and make this country just like theirs, the one that they're running from.
They're
Does that
voters.
make sense?
Oh, I get it. I very much get it. So when you look at why certain people are advocating for open borders and
They
DACA
want to
and that
destroy
sort
the
of thing,
country.
then you want to look behind that and find out what their motivations are. And if this isn't working, then that needs to work. And I think that's exactly what's
Yeah,
happening here.
the ends justify the means.
Door number one, door number two. This is not
Hmm.
working, so we need to bring in more
Or I
voters.
guess some people have the theory that you need more votes. Too many people are voting for Trump, so we need people to vote. The people who like freebies. So import a lot of people who are going to be dependent on taxpayer money. Be, you know, on the dole, and then they'll like to vote for that.
Precisely. And yet the interesting thing is people sort of go, that Trump has voted for this omnibus bill, but in reality, if you were just to close the borders and cut people off of welfare who are not residents, you would
Let's
actually.
send them back to where they came from. If they want to come here,
I'm just saying
fine.
that the
Do it the right way.
from a money point of view, the same people that are complaining about how much he's spending on the military or such, that same amount is almost the same amount being spent on the
No, it's
illegal.
much more. Think of the medical system and the welfare system.
Yes,
They're guaranteed a lifetime of why else do they want to be there?
it's
And if this
such
country
hypocrisy.
is so this is so weird is that the social justice people say what a horrible country this is. It's racist. It's this, that, and the other. Well, then why do so many people want to come here
Yep.
if it's such a hellhole? No, they like it because the way it is, but it's not going to keep being the way it is because they're importing. They can't help it. If you get a few truckloads of people from wherever, every hour carting in, at some point this country becomes like the one that they left.
Yeah, I think that
And
that's
that's something
kind
that
of
it isn't that you're being heartless. It's
kind of the
like
idea.
the way they used to do is you get to get assimilated. They slow down the influx. So you used to have to know the English language. If you don't have a national language, you don't have a country. You don't have borders, you don't have a country. You don't have culture, you don't have a country. So you need those three things, and that's part of I think Canada's problem. They're talking about getting Quebec out of things because they wanted to make it all French, and they keep fighting over that, I guess. But it's a problem with a country if you don't have a national language.
Hmm.
It's But at least you got two to worry about. What happens if you have to have an instruction manual for something with 150 languages?
I know it's pretty crazy. I don't know. People don't know that I live in Canada, so that's a humor here. Uh, I I live
Well,
in
I
this.
remember, was it in the 70s, or they're talking about Quebec splitting off from Canada?
Oh, they're always talking about it. It's just it goes on, and some people are some people that come into their positions of so-called power are more strident about it than others, and then the next group comes along and says, "Oh, we're not going to, you know, break off from Canada." But I have two kids that
What
live in
happens if
Quebec, so.
you get a whole bunch of Mexicans into Quebec and they insist that everybody talks Spanish?
Well, the problem with Canada is that you have this, there's sour grapes because there was an actual war that was fought and the French lost, but they got their little area. And so it's like Mexico being part of the US, and they're going to retain their culture and their language, but they're officially part of the US. And that actually did happen at a certain point. California was Mexico. And so if that.
Or like Texas, or what was it, Louisiana Purchase or something? It
Well,
was.
that's it. And it's just a bit more strident in this case because they've never admitted that they lost. So it's
Why don't we give you know California back to Mexico then? Just make part of Mexico.
I
It
think
already
they want to.
is.
I think they're going to be doing that pretty soon. A lot of people don't. You know what I love? I was born on Cinco de Mayo, which is the big liberation day when Mexico became Mexico. And what I found really funny was that they celebrated so much. Cinco de Mayo, they started drinking the tequila so much that it got taken back away from them again. So that like after 3 days, they had their big
That's pretty good.
3 day celebration, and I love
Yeah,
that
and then
story.
they signed away whatever without realizing what they're signing.
Well, that they were well. This was the trick. You see, they got them so drunk. Oh, let's have a big festivity. Cinco de Mayo, and then apparently, the bad guys were encouraging it, and then they just came back into the town, took it over again. Just thought, oh, that is tricky. That's a good
Well,
thing
like
to do.
what's happening with Europe, just muddling it all in with who knows what. It loses what it was.
Yep.
Spain was Spain, and France was France, and Italy was Italy, and Switzerland. Is it Switzerland or Sweden? One of those two says that they're not giving citizenship to anybody who's been on the government dole for the past 3 years
Well,
unless they pay it back. That's pretty good.
Sweden's having a huge problem. I think that they're rethinking their situation there. I mean, it's people can't go out on the
It
streets.
was such a con game of this business of importing people from wherever, and that was, I guess, part of the psyop, I think. Uh, but if there's truly a disastrous region, go help them fix it where they are, so they don't have to displace
Yeah.
themselves. They'll never see their homeland again.
And don't you think that's
You know,
exactly what Trump's doing? He's actually resettled some of the Syrians back into their own uh,
I hope
areas in the
that the ones
country.
that have been imported in the U.S. can't you send them back to where they were and make it a nice place and help them make it a nice place?
Well, I guess what you have to do is to ease them back into it by not bringing any more over. But you're right; it was a psyop and it was an infiltration. These were not uh, refugees. In the old day, well, even the boat people, we took in the boat people, and the people told me they said they were amongst the elite, the people that were able to pay off the communist regime were the boat people, and
But
the
what about the people who pay 10,000, whatever it is, and in 10 years, or maybe that's where the ten's from, lots of money to go through all the hoop jumping and lawyers and whatnot to become a U.S. citizen, and then they celebrate the day they become a U.S. citizen, and it's wonderful.
okay, I have to weigh in this because technically speaking, because my dad was American, born in LA, I should have been able to decide if I wanted to be American or Canadian. So the point here is that I had to apply, I had to go through all these different things, and I decided not to. I thought it was going to be
Well,
too much of a
that's
hassle.
different than somebody who says, "Oh, I like that country over there on the globe. Let me go there, and then I'm just going to walk in and say I want to be here
Well, what I'm
without
saying is that there's someone
any
like
kind of connection."
myself who technically has the right, and yet I have to go through a bunch of hoops. Now, why can't I just walk over the border and say, "Well, my dad was born here, so I'm American"? Why do I have to go through all the
Well,
paperwork?
you're walking over the wrong border.
I'm really
You got to
close to
go
a
down
border.
to Mexico and then walk in that way.
I wouldn't pass though. I just wouldn't pass. The problem is for me is that I wouldn't be able to say it with a straight face. I would tell them
Right,
the truth, and that I'm not saying that everybody that comes across the border is
right. But
lying.
we're I'm getting feeling a little bit silly, getting kind of tired here. But
Yes,
it's
we should
yeah,
wrap up.
it's a game that isn't thought out. And people want to be nice and kind and open-hearted. Well, the kindest thing you can do is keep America America. And if people are coming from a country that is horrible,
They get
and you bring them in
to,
by the truckloads, they're going to bring the same mannerisms in that created the yuckiness.
and on the other side, if you keep America, America, they get to come in and have all the benefits of the so-called American dream, whatever is left of that. But it will be reborn in the sense that you're
Hmm.
not living under a fascist regime like so many people are.
Here's a good example. You get people from like gang violence in downtown Chicago. And what's a really high priced neighborhood? Hollywood, or Beverly Hills. There we go. So
Sure.
let's get them, and then get a whole bunch of them and put them in the middle of Beverly Hills, and just let them run loose, and say that let them have asylum in Beverly Hills.
Yep.
What's going to happen to Beverly Hills?
Well, it's a funny
but
thing.
but
It's
if
like the
but if you get them, a few at a time, and take them there, show them how to have, here's a job, and then here's, and they start acting like they live there, rather than bringing Chicago ghetto into Beverly Hills.
well, we're really getting into some areas that people, all those
Yeah,
social
I
justice
was speaking
warriors
of
will
it just
just
in, like,
they're going to be
general,
down my
light
throat.
terms. But if you bring a whole, like, neighborhood to a different neighborhood, you change that other neighborhood.
Yes. Well, it's
Okay,
exactly the
we can
same
leave it at
thing.
that.
If you have friends, that everybody knows that the people that you hang around with are going to influence you somehow. And if you choose to hang
Hmm.
around addicts, or just for, I'm not saying everyone from Chicago is an addict. I'm just saying if you choose to hang around with people
Well,
who
I'm just, I
have
guess,
problems.
referring sort of to their highest, gun violence in the nation.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
see
so
what you're
it
saying.
doesn't that get transplanted elsewhere, and then it gets, the seedlings grow of that. You want good stuff to grow, not the stuff that they want it. They don't want the bad life they have in Chicago. Well, then leave it behind and take on adapt to the other neighborhood.
Hmm.
But instead, if you bring in massive numbers of people from wherever, they bring their culture with them, the
Well,
culture that they're trying to run from.
this is what my friend from Vietnam said, and this was in 1979. He said, wait for 20 years, because it's not that the people so much are bad, good. It's that they've lived in a culture where they've gotten away with not having to follow the rules because they were at war
Hmm.
for so long. And they were.
Exactly.
And so they've learned how to survive. And he said, "Oh, we come over here and we've got licenses. You got to buy a license for a visit for
But
a
like the
business."
kids in
And
Chicago know how to survive by pulling out their guns. And so
yeah,
they take that mannerism elsewhere. They have to learn that, no, that's not how we do it here. We don't pull out guns. We talk to people,
and it's a
or
very
whatever
hard
the
thing.
difference is.
Imagine from another country, if it's, we're talking about the same country, but if you're from another country where that's your means of survival. We're not talking about saying people are good or bad. Who knows that I wouldn't do that if I
Right,
was in the same
exactly. You're just
situation.
talking about customs, and ways of doing things.
And
And if you
habits.
bring it, that's what I'm talking about. If you bring, large quantities, they don't even have to learn English. They could just live like they were living where they were. So
Yep.
why leave their country if they're going to bring it with them? If you want to have a different life, then come here and learn the different life.
So my question is always, when you see people not getting that, are they being willfully stupid, or do they have a plan in
I think
ex-
they probably, most of them, just swallow the talking points that they're fed on the TV set,
so
and they,
so they're willfully
down
stupid.
into the emotional. Oh, you're anti this, you're anti that.
Oh yeah, it's always that you're anti. Back to Peter is enjoying listening to Nugget, because he's the one that named Nugget.
Oh, so he hears them.
He hears him and he says it's very. He's always
Oh,
noticing the chicks, and he also says you can take the gangsta out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the gangsta. You know what I'm saying? I hope I said that the way that you wanted me to. This is why I'd prefer you be on
let's
the
see. I
show,
can
because
turn it on.
it's hard.
Oops. There, I
hard.
got the. Yeah, I
That's my
got the.
best
Can you see the
gangsta.
camera?
Okay, are we gonna hear? We're
This
gonna
guy's leg
close.
stretched out. It's funny how he lays like that with his leg
Well,
out there. Whoops.
you did.
The
I have
camera's
to say,
backwards, so it's hard to
Dr.
get
Judy
it
did
right.
have her camera on at the very beginning of the show, and we saw a
Oh, there
chicken
he is.
lying.
You see him? He's right here.
I don't see. Just a sec. Are you sharing your
He's eating
screen?
the food.
Let me see. I just have to do something, folks. Moving that to that, and let me see if I can.
Nugget's a big,
That's
big
my squeaky
boy.
chair. Oh, there we go.
Oh, didn't like that. Did you hear that objection to the camera?
Right. Let me just. Okay, folks. Here you go. There is in live time. We've got. There is Nugget. Nugget cleaning himself,
He's got
and
his foot sticking out there. Just laying down.
when I first saw Nugget, he was lying down on his side, and honestly, he didn't look like he was alive. It was kind of frightening. He does this
He
weird
doesn't
thing.
do that outside, but he does it inside. And same with the other one with Puff.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how they've
Look at that!
grown?
Look at that!
Yep,
He's just laying on the side.
I did not know chickens did that. We have
It's just, I think it's just utter relaxation.
the under
Either
the
getting some darkness in them. Definitely, you can tell the silky genes.
we never did air that little video of the what was it? They were growing up a little bit. So we had the one of them hatching, but we did the one of them on the keyboard, but you were
Oh, how about
unavailable that
you
week.
play the ones from last night with the graduation up to the roost.
Okay, so what we're going to do, folks, I'm going to put some of these videos over on characterdriven.com. So if you haven't been over there, I do apologize because I revamped things, and so it's brand new. And if you go over to the community, I'm going to
Well,
really
I don't know
try.
about the intermediate ones, but the initial pictures and then the pictures later
Yeah, I
on.
think I'll put them over there so that people can take a look at them. I mentioned earlier
His
that we're
latest
just
stretches his neck out.
mentioning earlier that YouTube is really after me every time I put something up on the screen. So I'm putting some of the videos that we refer to over on characterdriven.com. Also, if they take me down for any reason, you'll know where to find me because I'm still going to continue streaming. We are going to continue streaming no matter what, even if they do take me right down. They've slowly, done everything they could, demonetized and done all the other stuff. So far, undaunted. But if you go over to characterdriven.com, you'll be able to stay up with what's happening. And I have to mention, too, that we have some lovely mugs and, where do the towers go? And the only reason I have merchandise there is as conversation starters because I just think it would be great to have a mug and be somewhere where people look at it and go, "Oh, what's that? What's that book?" And it's a good way to start talking about things. And there's T-shirts and that sort of thing. So that you're supporting this channel because I have been demonetized. It doesn't matter. Doing it anyway. It's not about that. But if you want to support Dr. Judy, then buy the book and go over to the website and follow what we're doing because we are trying to get the word out. We're trying to educate people, answer their questions. That's what this is all about. And we love the fact that you come and visit every week and hope that we can continue doing this as long as we're allowed to. Otherwise, we'll go back to our old system from 2012 or 2013 before YouTube was doing live streaming.
He's pecking at the camera.
Cute, eh? I'm going to have a less squeaky chair as well. I think that's one of the tricks. Oh, look, so cute. Let me see.
You hear that kicking? That's what I say is the boy in him. Just like leave me. I gotta move the way I want to move. Whoops! Come
Too
on,
busy talking.
come on.
Let me see what people are saying. We're going to wrap things up, but I'll let you hear. Trying to let you hear Nugget. Okay, so when Bhakta says, back to Peter, I'm not sure if you like Bhakta or Peter, or if I'm pronouncing that properly, says, by the way, there's a YouTube clip on YouTube of a Gambino gangster talking about 9/11. He says that the Bush crew did it and all the gold, oh gee, what a surprise. All the gold stored in the towers. Did it to steal all the gold. See, that's the thing. You can get into all sorts
storytelling.
of those kind of stories. But I think what's wonderful about Dr. Judy and her work is that she focuses just on the the evidence of where the towers went and how they uh, met their demise. And when you focus on that, you start to be able to look at evidence in a very, very specific way. And it's irrefutable. Whereas when we're talking about these peripheral things, that's great. That's, if you want to speculate or talk about that, and I do it myself. But what we're doing here is really focusing on learning how to be critical thinkers and focus in on the evidence and stay there.
Here's a good example of the groupthink issue. 9/11 was an inside job. Who started that?
Yeah, it's people that want to cover it up.
And saying it's inside job, you're saying you know who did the job. How do you know who did it before you know what it was that got done?
Yeah.
You can
Well,
speculate, but that's not evidence of anything.
it's exactly the same thing as people saying that they're going to take, they're going to start a court case about 9/11, and then they start naming all
And
these
you don't even know
people.
what
You have to
happened.
know
Yeah.
what happened first before you can start naming people. So that is also a psyop. If you see people talking about this, it's going around right now. Oh, they've put together this court case and they've named Cheney and Bush and this, it's a big long list of people. What are
Okay,
you
what
going
did
to
Cheney
accuse
do?
them
What did
of?
Bush do? But why don't they list Clinton? I mean, Clinton had more prep time, at least. I'm not saying that who did what, but it was only like 6 months or so that Bush was in there.
Mm-hmm. Well,
After he was sworn in, I mean, very little time, in office. But 8 years prior to that, Clinton was minding the store. So why did they pick one and not the other? You
and
can't
before
plan
that,
something like 9/11 in 6 months.
it was Daddy Bush. Before that, he was. They're all carrying on the same agenda. Let's face it. I mean,
Right.
they're
Oh
they're
yeah.
placed there.
But my point was just devil's advocate style.
Yes.
Like, why do people say, "Oh, it was, Bush done it"? Well, he didn't have time to plan.
Yep. Well, this is. I guess this is what
This
I'm
took
going to
a
call him
long time
Peter.
to plan.
Peter says that. He says he was just trying to point out that that's what people do. So thank you very much.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
Dustin
exactly.
says,
And they like to point fingers, and because then they feel like they're doing something. I don't know. But you also know there's certain truthers like Fetzer, who say, well, Judy doesn't talk about who did it. She just won't address it. That's suspicious. You know, trying to what is he trying to coax me into playing? Spin the dial on name that crook. Uh, why don't we talk about the proper stages of an investigation? I mean,
yep,
think about Perry Mason, old Perry Mason movies.
do,
You
do,
know,
do,
it's
do. Oh, that's
it
different. That's
isn't
Dragnet.
just about his gun got fired and the bullet ended up in the victim. It has his fingerprints were on it, and this is also what he did and why he was. They make a specific connection
Yep.
to uh, to something, not saying, well, I just know he's evil, so therefore that guy must have done it. And that's no different than witch hunts, and that's what we're moving towards.
And on that note, at the 3 minute, 3 hour and 2 minute
Well,
mark,
we need to go because
we're going
this
to
little
wrap it
guy's
up.
got to get outside with his friends.
That's right. I thank you so much, and I thank you for all your great comments. And I know you're great supporters of Dr. Judy, and I'm so thankful for people spending their time here. Please do go over to characterdriven.com, buy the book, and share it with your friends if you can, because that's the best way to support Dr. Judy. Educate yourself, educate other people, and help them to understand how a real investigation works and get them away from this narrative and mantra, as Bhakta Peter was calling it. So, yeah, where's Columbo when you need him? That's exactly right. Well, we've got Columbo right here in the form of Dr.
Yes.
Judy Wood. I want to thank you very much, Dr. Judy, for being with me again today and spending so much
Well,
time.
thanks for hosting this. Even though
Well,
I'm kind of like so tired and wiped out and just kind of rambling on, but if people are here for it, then it must be that they're here for something.
Yes. Well, the
It's
giant.
community.
Oh,
It's community.
J-Man the Giants fan says, "Tell Dr. Wood I say hello," and Bacta Peter says,
Okay.
"Tell Dr. Wood we love her. Tell her we are sending her our love." Okay, thank you so much. You guys are great, and we're gonna wind up the show. Nugget says bye.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, you guys.
One of the initial steps of the military Psyop program is directed toward the hostland military establishment itself. Since the military represents the government to the populace, their actions and attitudes can do much to create a favorable image of that government in the minds of the people. A soldier's attitude goes a long way toward implementing an effective military Psyop program. Among the support elements needed are the light mobile printing team with its printing and editorial shelters. Also needed is a radio team to support existing radio stations, particularly in the back country. An audiovisual vehicle will help to increase the effectiveness of face-to-face communications. And a loudspeaker team will support tactical operations.
To hear you talk. So
Did they like to see Nugget?
they did, and this guy's the one that named him, but the Bhakta Peter guy, and so he, as soon as he came in, he says, "I can hear Nugget in the background." It's just such a cute little audience, you know. It's
Yeah.
they're
That's like because I've got my junk pile here, sprawled out in my bed, but I hope that not too much trash showed up.